Madam Clerk, or do we have Mr. Clerk?
It's Madam Clerk.
Okay, Madam Clerk, we're going to have a call to order the joint meeting of the Engrossment Rules Resolution and Credentials Committee meeting held jointly with the Health and Human Service Committee. If you would call the roll, please.
The Engrossment Committee, we're going to call Alderwoman Howard.
Present.
Alderwoman Green.
Present.
Alderman Todd.
Present.
Chairwoman Tyus.
Present.
For the Health and Human Services Committee members, Alderwoman Engrossment.
Present.
Alderwoman Martin.
Present.
Alderwoman Navarro.
Present.
Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderwoman Rice.
Present.
And Chairwoman Spencer.
Present.
9 present.
Would you explain why you skipped several members of the Health and Human Service Committee meeting? Members?
Because it's overlapping. So should I have still called?
No, I think you should, but since you didn't, I wanted people to know that there are several members that are on the Rules Committee that are also in Health and Human. Okay, please do so that we'll make sure we do it the correct way.
You want me to start from Engrossment or just from Health and Human Services?
No, just the ones that you didn't call on health, please.
Okay. Alderwoman Tyus.
Present.
Alderwoman Green.
Present.
And Alderman Todd.
Present.
We have 9 present.
Okay, there's been a quorum on both the Engrossment and Rules Resolution and Credentials Committee and Alderwoman Spencer. Do you want to say there's a quorum for health, or do you mind if I just go ahead?
I defer to you, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay, thank you. Also, there being a quorum for Health and Human Service Committee. Madam Clerk, we are prepared to start the agenda. There is one person that is missing. That is your person. Are we going to excuse Alderwoman Middlebrook? Do you wait to the end of the committee, Alderwoman Spencer?
I will, at this point, accept the motion to excuse the necessary absence of Alderwoman from the second. Is somebody from the?
I move that we suspend, that we, oh, what was your motion? I'm sorry. That we excuse the necessary absence of Alderwoman Lisa Middlebrook from the second ward.
Is there a second on the motion?
Second.
Hearing no objection, I would excuse the Alderwoman from the second.
I want to just say this is a little, it's not historic because before we've done this, but never on Zoom. We've had, in my prior life as the 24th Alderwoman, we had joint meetings. We decided to have a joint meeting because this issue of the health director touches on credentials and qualifications, and it also touches a lot on the Health and Human Service Committee. It is fortuitous that so many of us serve on both committees. I wasn't really going to bring resolution number 12 before us because it actually got sent to the Rules and Resolution Committee. But I did want to do what I asked about having this joint meeting is that I wanted to do some kind of a foundation of about what our rules are, what our charter is, what the requirements are, how things are done. There have been a lot of what I believe to be misinformation out about what our qualifications are to be the director. And I only got involved in this when I was sent a email from our city councilor, Julian Bush, which I commend him because that's what he was required to do by law, that corrected an error in testimony from Dr. Echols, in which when asked if he was a licensed physician in an ongoing lawsuit, he said he was, and correctly so. The city councilor corrected that. That's what you're supposed to do as a lawyer. But that got me to wondering as I start to hear things, because when Dr. Echols first came last February, I read in an article that he was not licensed in Missouri, and it was in the Post-Dispatch. And so I didn't think anything of it, because if lawyers and doctors move, sometimes they will not be licensed in the new place that they go to. And they actually have to get a new license, or sometimes there's something called reciprocity, which I found out that not only can lawyers have it, but doctors do too, where if they've been practicing for a certain amount of time, there's reciprocity and they can get a license in. I was quite concerned when I heard that he said he had let his license lapse. And so I did start to do some digging and talking to people, and just went to the charter to see what was our requirements. I actually was here when we changed the requirements in 2002. I was the Alderwoman of the 20th Ward, and we actually did send a vote out to the residents of the city of St. Louis, the voters, and we changed the requirement because it used to strictly say you had to be a doctor. And so we did get that changed in November of 2002. So when I started hearing people say, well, this was a requirement from back in the days when we had a hospital, that just wasn't true. And there were other things. And so I think that the Board of Aldermen ought to be about the oversight. And I've often said that about other, not just Dr. Echols, you've heard me on the floor talking about other commissions and boards and appointments, that we ought to be doing a better job of vetting these people. And as I started to question what was going on, I guess I found out that I didn't feel like that Dr. Echols had been vetted, and I really had a question about if he met any of the qualifications that were outlined in the charter. So I then wrote to Mr. Richard Franks, who is our personnel director, with a set of questions, which I've emailed to all of you all, and I sent it to the clerk. And again, I'm sorry that I didn't get it out earlier, because I started sending this stuff and it was stuck in my outbox. But it asked him a series of questions about how our civil service works, because the other thing that I saw was a problem that we had people thinking the health director and the health commissioner were the one and the same. They're not. They're two different positions. And I don't know, most of us should know that the mayor appoints directors. She has several people that she can appoint, including the city councilor. The personnel director actually is appointed by the Civil Service Commission. Well, they vet him. So she appoints the city councilor, director of public safety, on, including the director of health. But commissioners are civil service positions that have to go through a civil service vetting. So as I further started to do investigation, and I went online and I looked up the health director, it said Dr. Echols, and I looked up the health commissioner and it said Dr. Echols. So I then I called the personnel director and said, do we have a health commissioner? He said no. That was a concern to me, because a lot of the things that we are supposed to be doing are done under the health commissioner, especially during this time when we have COVID problem. It's done under the health commissioner, not necessarily the health director. So the more things that I start to inquire about, the more things were not kosher for me. It is not to pick on anybody, but all of us have to be vetted. When we get elected, there are requirements about how you become a member of the Board of Aldermen. And once you are elected, you still have to come to the Rules and Credentials Committee to make sure that you have met all the requirements. People will talk about qualifications, so I'm not going to use that term if I can, because it is, yes, it's qualifications, but it's also the requirements under our charter. So I wanted the personnel director to be here to speak to about how that civil service works. I wanted the city council to be here because I wanted him to be able to answer questions about our charter, which I have always been taught that was the governance of the city of St. Louis and the rules that we were supposed to go by. And that people couldn't change them just because they didn't like them, that there was a method that we all know that you have to bring it before the Board of Aldermen or else put it out to initiative and do a vote. And I also wanted Dr. Will Ross, I want to thank him for being here also because he is the head of the Joint Committee for Hospital, what is the correct title? Hospital and Health Board, or I may have it a little wrong, but so I wanted to just for us to be able to have this discussion to see what we should be doing if it happens that Dr. Echols is correctly licensed or correctly meets one of these qualifications, and he's been maligned, and that's not true. I think that's something we need to know. And if he does not meet these qualifications or one of these requirements, I should say, then that is something we also need to know. You all, and I wasn't here, but they've actually removed an alderman who, from the 21st Ward many years ago because he lived in a different ward, and they took him to court and removed him. We fired people who worked for the city who violated the residency requirement. I do believe it is up to us to be the oversight committee, and so that's why I did this resolution. And when I presented it, there were people who said, well, we think that this ought to be before the health committee. I think the more people who ask questions and try to get to the bottom of this, it's better. And at the end, I will be asking, I hope to be asking Dr. Echols and whoever vetted Dr. Echols in the mayor's office, but I just wanted us to have a firm understanding of the different components of the city, of the ordinances, the not statutes, but the charter, how civil service works and the things like that. And I thought that, and also how health and hospital interacts with our health director. And I thought the people who were best able to answer those questions were the three people I asked. Alderwoman Spencer, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chairwoman Tyus. I'll just add that I am grateful for the members of the Health Committee for joining us today. I know, I think we have almost everybody here. My role here as the chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, and that what I'm asking my members of my committee to do is to listen. The Alderwoman from the first has brought forward some questions, and of course we'll do our due diligence to hear those questions and to get the answers that we seek. In the midst of a global pandemic, which we all know we are in, there are any number of things we can and should be doing to serve the community that elected us to serve in the way that we serve. In fact, I would argue that there are an infinite number of things that we can be doing to serve our public through this. And as leaders, it's our job to prioritize our actions as we are all limited in time, and our actions must be swift to properly serve our community. The most important thing that we can be doing as leaders right now, I believe, is to build trust. And we are asking our public to do a lot of things, following guidelines, following our guidance, and we need their trust to be able to comply with the things we need them to comply with to promote public health and public safety. It's my hope that with this hearing we can answer these questions once and for all and get back to establish that trust and continue serving our public. With that, I will defer to the chairwoman from the Rules Committee, the Alderwoman from the first, who's brought forward these questions before us.
Okay. I don't know, because I didn't get my documents, did everybody get a copy of the resolution that I wrote in your documents? They should have sent you documents. Not that I emailed, but in the Google documents, there should have been, since that it was on the agenda, it should have been a copy of the resolution. Yes, no. If not, I think I did have it read the Friday before, and if you look in your Google Docs, I think it's there. But anyway, if you don't mind, I would like to start out by asking our city councilor is here, Julian Bush, if he would speak to us and answer questions, if that's all right with the committees. Anybody object to that? Okay. Can we unmute Mr. Bush, please? You might have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, I can hear you now. How are you this afternoon?
Fine, it's delightful to be unmuted. So.
Oh, before you were a city councilor, you were unmuted as a judge for a lot of years. I kind of feel powerful that I can mute a judge. Thank you for being with us today. You and I have had a conversation of sorts about why I did the resolution, and I did tell you that after I saw your document that you submitted to court, that I thought that was something that we need to get to the bottom of. And so can you tell what I want to start out with is, who do you represent as the city councilor? That's one of the questions I always ask you. What is your understanding of who you represent and as the city councilor and the people who work for you?
I represent, and they represent the city of St. Louis.
In that capacity, do you also represent different officers like the mayor, the board of aldermen, the health commissioner? So do you have like kind of a large job of representing all of us at the same time?
Well, the city of St. Louis is a artificial person, and of course it has to act through its constituents. That's how the rules describe people as constituents. Under the city charter, the city councilor is responsible for answering and advising certain city officials, the mayor, the ward alderman, department heads, and perhaps others, division heads through the department heads. That's our responsibility to advise important city officials with respect to their rights and responsibilities and legal obligations. In addition, from time to time, city officials are sued. And when a city official is sued and requests that the city council provide representation, ordinarily we do. It's not invariably the case, but ordinarily we will represent a city employee or official who is sued.
Okay. Now, you talked about the city charter. Could you explain to us what the city charter is, please?
Yeah, the city charter has been described as the city's constitution, and that's not a bad way of describing it. It's not quite the city's constitution because the city is bound under certain circumstances by state law, and of course the state constitution, and the United States Constitution and federal law. But it's a fair approximation. The city charter lays out the basic structure of city government. It creates many of the city offices. Some city offices are created by ordinance. It assigns duties, it places limits on them, and so on and so forth. I think it's fair to say it's the organic document that rules the city government. And of course, as you know, the Board of Aldermen is a legislating body, but its ordinances have to conform to the city charter.
So in the city charter, Article 10 is the law department, is that correct?
That's correct.
And under the law department, one of the things, and in most other departments, is Section 3 is entitled Qualification of City Councilors and Appointees. Is that correct?
I'll take your word for it. I don't have it in front of me, and I haven't read it.
Okay.
Sure, it's true.
Well, I promise you I'm reading directly from it, okay? It actually does say Section 3, Qualifications of City Councilors and Appointees. And often, as in this charter, we have a section in each department just about that talks about the qualification, especially for city employees that are appointed by the mayor. That's often under whatever the article and the section is. Are you familiar with that at all?
I'm familiar that there are many provisions of the charter that establish the qualifications for many city positions.
Okay, so under Section 3, a qualification of city councilor and appointees, it says the city councilor and associates and assistant city councilors shall be attorneys at law entitled to practice in all the courts in the state for at least 3 years previous to their in the state for at least 3 years previous to their appointment. So that means if you want to be a city councilor, you have to be an attorney entitled to practice. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that means you have to have passed the bar?
Yes, to be an attorney, you must pass the bar, yes.
And so if I would ask you, are you a licensed attorney, would you be able to explain to me, would you be able to answer to me yes or no?
I would be able to.
And are you a licensed attorney?
I am.
And if I would ask you, how could you prove it? How do attorneys prove that they are licensed?
If you asked me to prove it, I would spend probably a considerable amount of time looking for my license. And I hope that I would be successful, but if I fail to be successful, I would ask the Supreme Court to provide me with a duplicate copy.
Okay, and I'm sorry, you said you would be looking for your what?
license, by license.
Okay. And do we, our attorneys also provided a bar card?
That's correct. That I could find easily, I believe.
That's what I thought you were going to say, because that's what I do, okay? That was so you would go get your actual license, so that's really extra special. So when city councilors are appointed, and you were appointed by Mayor Cruzen, is that correct?
It is correct.
And so did you sit down with anybody in her office to vet you or to talk to you about your credentials and qualifications?
To the best of my knowledge, I never was asked if I had a license to practice law in Missouri. I believe that they drew a reasonable inference that I had such a license, since it's a qualification for the job I had prior to the time I was city councilor.
Okay. Now, what about the assistant city councilors? They're not appointees. They actually go through civil service.
That's correct.
So, and you're the appointing authority. So, and I will talk to the director of personnel later, but the director of personnel does their vetting, and they send you what, 3 to 6 people for each position? Is that approximately how many? Do you know?
6 people, 6 names.
6 people. But before you can get those 6 names, they actually have to be vetted by the Department of Personnel.
Yes, they are given what's called a test by the Department of Personnel. They're ranked by the Department of Personnel, and I have presumed that their credentials are reviewed to make sure that they are in order.
But we can talk to the Director of Personnel, who can tell us more about that later, okay?
Yes.
And so I'm kind of uncomfortable asking this question because I don't want you to violate anybody's right, but so you turned in the memorandum, which you weren't the attorney of record, I guess, but one of your assistant city councilors. There's a lawsuit currently ongoing against the city of St. Louis. And during the lawsuit, I guess Dr. Echols was called to testify. And in his testimony, he was asked if he was a licensed doctor. And as I understand it, he answered to the affirmative. And then when it was discovered that was not true, then under your signature, but I know you have a lot of attorneys working for you, you then turned that back into the court to make sure that you cleared up the mistake. Is that correct?
All that's true, except the lawsuit is no longer pending. It's been dismissed.
Okay, but at the time it was pending.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and are you required by law to turn in whenever your quote unquote client makes a mistake or error? Are you required to notify the court?
There's an ethical obligation imposed on attorneys to make sure that untruthful remarks that the attorney knows about are corrected.
So, and I don't want to get any deeper into that because then I don't know but attorney-client privilege, so I will leave that alone for now, okay? But I do have some questions about how you knew that was not true, but I will move on from that. When I was sworn into office, and all of us, we take an oath of office. Do you remember taking your oath of office when you were sworn in as the city councilor?
I do.
Okay, and we sign it, and it's recorded in the registrar's office?
That's my understanding.
Okay, and so this oath of office says, and I have yours, I have mine, I have everybody, if you will trust me, because this is the oath of office, and it says that I, Julian Bush, of the city of St. Louis, do solemnly swear that I have all the qualifications and am not subject to any of the disqualifications named in the charter for the office or employment I am about to assume. I will support the Constitution of the United States and of this state and the charter and the ordinance of the city. And I will be influenced only by the consideration of fitness in the appointment, promotion, demotion, suspension, or discharge of officers or employees, that I will not expend nor authorize the expenditures of money otherwise than for the adequate consideration and efficient service to the city, and will faithfully discharge the duties of my office or employment. Is that thereabout what you kind of remember we took? Because I didn't remember saying all of that until I read it. Do you think that's a fair representation of what you signed?
I have no recollection of what was the oath, but I have every confidence that that is correct. That is what I
Okay.
signed.
And the reason I read that is because one of the things it says you are swearing when you get sworn in as an officer of the city that you have the qualifications and not subject to any disqualifications, and that you will support the charter. And all of us, in different forms, that's what it says. For the members of the Board of Aldermen, we don't really realize that we're doing that, I think. But when we get sworn in and we're there and the judge, whoever it was, and you may have sworn us in once or twice before, and Judge Edwards and other people, that we actually signed the oath of office, and it is recorded in the registrar's office, and we all swear that we are qualified for our position and that we will uphold the charter, which has been talked about before. So, and I do have, I'm going to put this into the official records later because I do have copies for you and all the people that's coming before us, and also for Dr. Echols and myself. I didn't do the other aldermen necessarily, but I did myself too. And so my question is, kind of going into the weeds a little bit, is that as we speak to other people, are you aware of the qualifications for health director in the charter?
I am.
And
But let me clarify. You know, the charter doesn't know a position called director of health. The charter knows a position called director of health and hospitals. That's a legacy of the days when the Department of Health and Hospitals had two divisions, a health division and a hospital division. I believe the hospital division has been inoperative after the last city hospital was closed. And I think it's a matter of common parlance. Most often, people refer to the position as Director of Health, but formally, it's the position of Director of Health and Hospitals, as I know that you know, but others might be confused by that.
I do, and thank you for correcting me. I love it when I talk to lawyers. You are aware, within my resolution, I think I've talked to you that back in 2002, as a member of the Board of Aldermen, then we did change the requirement so that we did not have to have a Dr. B. That was not the only way you could become the Director of Health and Hospital. Are you aware of that?
The Board of Aldermen submitted to the voters a charter amendment that changed that requirement. Yes, absolutely.
Right. And the voters did not reject it. They did approve it, and it went into effect November of 2002.
That sounds right.
Okay. And do you know what the requirements to be the health director are?
I do.
Okay. And can you tell me what they are?
Right. There are three possible ways of qualifying for the position. The first is that the candidate be a licensed practitioner of medicine and surgery and a graduate of an accredited school of medicine and have either 3 years experience in public health work with at least 2 years of such experience in a responsible administrative capacity, or have 3 years of experience, at least 3 years of experience in the practice of medicine. That's the first way of qualifying for the office. The second way of qualifying for the office is to have completed graduate work in an accredited school of public health to the level of a master's degree in public health and have at least 2 years of experience in the practice of medicine, or have had at least 3 years of experience in public health work with at least 2 years of such experience in responsible administrative capacity. The third way of qualifying for this office is to have been certified by the American Board of Preventive Medicine and Public Health and to have at least 3 years of experience in the practice of medicine, or at least 3 years experience in public health work with at least 2 years of experience in a responsible administrative capacity. Okay.
And so these requirements, and have to be fulfilled in one of three ways.
Yes,
Is that correct?
yes.
And are we able to change the charter at will? Can we decide that we don't want people, or that people have different qualifications and they substitute for any of these one of these three options? Can we substitute? Are we allowed to do that?
No, with a caveat. Over the decades, there have been a number of times when mayors have appointed acting directors of public health and hospitals. And I think that's probably happened with other positions as well. It's not unusual. St. Louis County, the current directors of health are acting directors. We know from the newspapers that the President of the United States has appointed a lot of acting officers, and that is an accepted practice. So I will agree with you with that caveat or proviso.
Okay. When you say it's accepted practice, what you mean is that the mayors have gotten away with doing it, even though the charter in no point says that you can do that.
The charter doesn't say anything about that, I don't believe, but I do believe that it's accepted. The law accepts that practice.
And when you say an acting person, then they cannot be the actual person, because they're just acting, because our charter requires that you have one of those three requirements. Is that correct?
They would not hold the office. They would be the acting holder of the office.
And
which means, in my view, an acting director can exercise on a temporary basis the authority that is normally reposed in that office. But, for example, I have a term of office. The director of health and hospitals has a term of office. An acting director or an acting city councilor would not have that term of office. They could be removed at will. There is a distinction.
So, yes. But again, so it is your opinion that it's an accepted practice, but I've often found, and you and I have been here much at the same time, when I came before you were a city councilor, not the city councilor, is that the mayors carve out these things, and sometimes the people have no, because I can remember prior mayors carving out somebody who was the president of the board of BPS that absolutely had no engineering experience, nothing close to it. And so they carve it out until somebody challenges them, is what I found out. That if it gets challenged under the, accepted practice is different than what the charter says. And so I want to know, in your opinion, is there anything in the charter that allows this to happen?
I am not aware of such a provision.
Okay. All right. And you're also aware of that directors are different than commissioners.
Typically, under the scheme of a charter, a director is a department head and a commissioner is a division head.
Right. And the commissioners go through civil service. Is that right?
Typically, I am not certain whether or not there are any commissioners that are not required to go through the Civil Service Commission. There may not be, but certainly typically commissioners are what's sometimes called classified service employees or civil service employees. Yes.
And then they report to the directors.
Yes.
Okay. And they would then have to go through the same process that the assistant city councilors go through in your office, which is then they would be vetted in the personnel department, and then the personnel department would send 6 people who then the director could pick, director of health could pick one of those 6 people that have been vetted by personnel. Is that your understanding?
Yes, I'm going to say typically. The only reason I'm saying typically is there could be some position buried in the charter for a commissioner, right, that the rules are different. I'm not saying there are, but I don't know that there aren't. I certainly will agree, okay, the very least, typically, and maybe always, the way you described the way the appointment of a commissioner is made is accurate.
And I don't know if you are familiar with our personnel director is very powerful, because years ago we had problems with people who use political pressure. And so they changed the rules and made our personnel director a pretty powerful position so that he or she would not be subjected to political pressure, I guess would be the best way I would describe it. And to make sure that civil service was done, I think, from what I could read, in the proper way that it was meant to, it was legislated to be done. Is that your understanding? Or if you have a different one, I would like to hear it.
I would certainly agree that the Director of Personnel was a powerful official in the city's scheme of government. And I'm not sufficiently knowledgeable about the history of St. Louis to be confident of the circumstances that led to the creation of that position. But I suspect that your history is accurate.
Okay. And one of the things about that is important about civil service is that we vet people and make sure that they meet the qualifications and that they're not somehow being unfairly advantaged or disadvantaged, that people are given a fair chance.
Yes, absolutely.
Would you agree?
I would agree.
Okay.
I do agree.
At this point, I don't have any further questions for the city councilor, and I would like to defer to Alderwoman Spencer. Do you have questions?
I have no questions. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Do you want me to go down the line of, I'll go down rules and then you can go down health if you want to. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. Alderwoman Green, do you have any questions?
Just one clarifying question. Did you say you represent the city is the way that you look at your job, not individual people within the city?
The job of the city councilor is to represent the city of St. Louis. But from time to time, city employees and officials are sued. In those instances, they often ask that the city councilor represent the individual employee or official. And if there is no conflict of interest, we typically, but not invariably, will represent the individual employee or official who is sued.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. That's my only question.
Alderwoman Howard, do you have any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Bush.
You're welcome.
Alderman Todd.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Alderwoman Spencer, I turn it over to you for your committee members.
Okay, and I apologize here. I don't have my seniority list in front of me. I'll start. So I'm kind of scrambling for that here at the moment. Members from my committee, does anybody have a question?
I can tell you, Alderwoman Engrossment is the senior member.
Alderwoman Engrossment, I see your hand raised.
Thank you. I'm curious, Julian, if you can describe the process by which Dr. Echols was hired and whether or not, again, I apologize, I'm a little bit confused if he's considered a director or a commissioner.
I did not participate in the process of hiring Dr. Echols, so I have no personal knowledge that would permit me to answer that question.
Okay. Do you know if Dr. Echols has completed a medical residency? And if so, where?
Of course, I have no personal knowledge, but I have talked with Dr. Echols. I know that he is a graduate of the Boston University School of Medicine, and I am confident that he did a residency, but I don't know where he did his residency. But I'm
Okay.
sure that I don't think that is an
Yeah,
issue.
and I can defer some of these questions to Dr. Echols, but I was just, yeah,
I suspect Dr.
confident
Rock
that-
might be in a position to answer that question, but you'll find out when he testifies, perhaps, if you ask him.
Okay. And then do you know any reason why Dr. Echols wasn't made an acting director, as the last two folks in my short time at City Hall were just acting, if that was an option?
I did not participate in those discussions, but I'm confident that it was believed that he had the credentials to be the director. He wasn't confined to being an acting directorship. But again, I did not participate in those decisions, but I feel confident that there was a perception that he was qualified under the charter. And I know there's a belief.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I cut you off. I apologize.
Well, I was going to say, I believe there are many people that there are people that believe he's qualified to this day. It's a matter of dispute.
Yes, I was not trying to argue one way or the other. I apologize if that was the way the question was taken. So thank you. As
All right.
always, appreciate your time. No further questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, the next person is myself, and I don't want to have any questions at this time, and then it's Alderwoman Green is next.
Okay. Counselor Bush, or Judge Bush, would you mind repeating that? I'm sorry, we got a little glitchy on my end. I believe the question was what your opinion as to whether or not Dr. Echols fulfills the requirements.
Well, that would depend on what the facts are. And I don't have any personal knowledge of what the facts are. But based on what I know, I say, we'll have to say very regretfully, because I think he's done a splendid job as Director of Health and Hospitals. I think he's almost satisfies those requirements, but he's not quite there. I say that with great regret because, you know, I've spent a lot of time with Dr. Echols these last couple of months, and really honored to have worked with him. He's been dedicated, intelligent. He's used great common sense. He's been brave, and he's acted with great integrity. I have nothing but admiration for him and the job that he's done in his position. I think he's served the people of the city of St. Louis, you know, almost heroically, indefatigably for sure. And I think he is very close to those qualifications, but I say with great regret, I don't think he's quite there. Based on what I know of his biography.
I didn't anticipate your answer. I would agree with you. You know, Dr. Echols, I appreciate you being here today. I'm remiss in not having thanked you at the beginning of this hearing for being here. You know, every time I've had a question or you know, asked you to participate in something, you've been more than accommodating at all hours of day and evening. And I appreciate the hard work you've been putting in, and your service has been, the time you've shared with us has been very, so thank you for being here today. We didn't acknowledge your presence tonight.
Sorry, Alderwoman, I don't know if anybody else is experiencing it. Alderwoman Spencer, I could not hear what you just said.
You could not hear what I said. Well, I could just repeat. I just was mentioning that I was remiss in not thanking Dr. Echols at the beginning of this hearing for being here today, for his service to our city, and remarking on the sheer volume of time he has spent answering my questions, the questions of the public, and the questions of many of us here, always answering my calls, at least I can attest to that, and being of great service in these extremely trying times. Thank you for the clarification.
Do you mind if I ask just one more clarifying question, Madam Chairman?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Mr. Bush, can you talk about at a level that's not, you know, attorney-client privilege? I guess I was very disturbed. I was listening in on the call with the lawsuit against the city from Arch City Defenders, when Michael Garvin asked Dr. Echols if he was a licensed physician, and he indicated yes. It was a very cut and blank question. Can you explain, not maybe like with the specificity of that question, but your understanding of what constitutes legally as misinformation or a misstatement, and what constitutes perjury?
Well, mistakes in testimony are very common. As misstatements, in other words, statements that are not accurate, that are not true, in your own life, they happen all the time. We always make mistakes. All of us make mistakes. It's not perjury to give an answer that's not truthful, not accurate. It's perjury to make a deliberate misstatement of a material fact. Now, that's if I had a law book in front of me, I would give you a more rigorous definition, but mistakes are not perjury. Deliberate lies are perjury. Under certain circumstances, lies are perjury, not all circumstances, but mistakes are not. Misstatements are not.
Okay. Is there any sort of, just forgive me for my ignorance, I'm just a paralegal, any case law that I could review or something that would like head me in the right direction? I mean,
Sure.
I'm a human being. I make mistakes literally every single day. And a lot of those entail consequences. But I'm just still very troubled by a question from Mike Garvin. Are you a licensed physician? Answer, yes. I'm very troubled by that. So if there's anything that I can review that would help clarify that for me, I would appreciate it.
It's not that complicated. The state of Missouri has a criminal code which defines 95 or maybe 98% of crimes in the state of Missouri. If you would turn to the criminal code, I'm fairly confident that you would find a very brief statute that would define what perjury is. And you're a paralegal, so you're familiar with the revised statutes in Missouri, I believe. And I don't think you would find it difficult at all to find a precise definition of what perjury is in a way that's easily comprehensible. I will say this. I've worked side by side, figuratively, I think, and metaphorically with Dr. Echols for the last several months. And I am confident in my heart that there was no deliberate misstatement. Sometimes questions are misunderstood, misapprehended. That's not rare at all. Anybody who sat through a trial is accustomed to hearing different views on different matters. And sometimes it's perjury.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And that may also be why when we met with Dr. Echols for the first time a couple of months ago, he indicated that he thought that the coronavirus was just like the flu. So yeah, a lot of misinformation and missteps, and we are where we are. So thank you for your time, Mr. Bush. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Chairwoman Tyus, I'm having some technical difficulties with the Google Drive here, and I'm unable to open my roll call. Would you mind assisting in helping me get through the rest of the Health Committee roll call, please?
Alderwoman Megan Green, do you have any questions?
No further questions.
Alderwoman Sarah Martin, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Alderwoman Heather Navarro, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Alderwoman Annie Rice, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Alderman Jesse Todd, do you have any questions?
Oh, thank you, Chairwoman.
Okay. I would like to follow a line that you made. Did you say you had questions, Alderman Todd? I'm sorry.
No, I do not have any, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bush, you talked about that the mayors have made these people acting directors and that they are temporary and they don't have a term of office like the regular directors, because in the charter, the term of office is the term that the mayor serves, right? Is that correct?
That is correct.
So then the mayors could go around. What you're telling me is that it is your testimony that it is the intent of the charter that the mayor could appoint somebody as acting director, not follow any of the rules, not be any of the qualifications, and that was what the charter, and I'm sorry, we're in Missouri where they're talking about plain language and plain meaning of words. You're telling me that that is the plain language and meaning of the charter to allow the mayors to be able to do that?
I'm not saying it's a language of the charter, plain or otherwise. I'm saying that it's, I believe it's well established in American law that public officials can appoint acting officers when circumstances dictate. It goes back, I think, at least with the Director of Health and Hospitals back at least the 1980s, when it was actually pretty much impossible to hire a Director of Health and Hospitals who met the charter requirements. I remember a lawsuit, you might remember this, that was filed back in the 80s against Mayor Shamel to require him to appoint a Director of Health and Hospitals. I remember it very well because I represented Mayor Shamel, and we won. He was not required to appoint a qualified Director of Health and Hospitals.
He was not required, and did it go past the municipal courts? Was it in federal courts? I kind of remember it, but I don't remember any of the details. Can you tell me where did it land?
It was filed in circuit court. It was filed by a doctor who lived in St. Louis, maybe two doctors, I can't quite remember. And I believe it went up to the Court of Appeals and the circuit court was affirmed. And Mayor Shamel was not required to appoint a director. It was left as an acting director.
And was your argument that it was impossible to find anybody that met the qualifications at that time?
No. If I remember correctly, and I may not remember correctly, we're talking about 35 years ago. I think our contention was it was a political question and not appropriate for the court, a court to intervene.
Oh, so you're telling me that you argued, even though the courts removed Barney Mueller because he didn't live in the ward as an alderman, and we have fired citizens who have violated the residency requirement, that the court found that it was okay for the mayor not to follow the city charter because it was a political question? Is that what I'm hearing?
I believe that's what was decided. I know Mayor Shamel won, but I mean it was 35 years ago.
So I'm not going to belabor that point anymore. What I'm going to do is you're going to get a request from me for a city councilor's opinion about interim and temporary appointments, because I do know the difference, and I would beg to differ from you. I think that the mayors get away with a lot of things. Since I've been here, there are a lot of things that people have always said, this is the way it always was. But when you actually read the rules, it doesn't. So you and I will have a conversation later, in which I'm going to ask you to research and find out about that, because I don't think the mayor should be making those kind of appointments at all, or on a very limited basis if it was an emergency. But what you do is you then leave out people who actually have the qualifications, and especially after we took the time to go back to the citizens to amend the charter. What is the point of a charter? What is the point of the citizens having a say? If then we allow these giant loopholes that people don't follow. I'm not a loophole person, so I kind of disagree with you on that. But I would love to hear how you did that, because that's good lawyering, I would say. But I will be asking for official city council opinion about this later, okay?
I will be looking forward to getting your request and having an opportunity to think through it thoroughly.
Okay. Madam Chairwoman Spencer, if no one else has any questions, I'd like to speak to another of the people that we bring another person that we need to testify before us. Is there anyone else that you know? Do you have any questions?
There are no further questions. Chairwoman, please proceed.
Is there anyone? I'm looking to see if there's a hand up. Is there anyone there that has any further questions? Mr. Bush, do you have to go, or can you stay with us in case somebody thinks of something later?
I can stay, but I have a feeling I'm about to be muted, but I'll take that personally.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. You are always a joy to work with. I've been knowing you for a long time, and I appreciate the difficult position you have as being the city councilor that represents the city, and then all these little giants that also represent the city. So I appreciate you. Thank you for coming to testify.
You're welcome.
The next person I would like to bring forth is Director of Personnel, Richard Franks. Is he there? Frank, is he here? Mr. Frank?
I see his name on the screen, but it doesn't look like he has a camera or a microphone. He may have lost his connection.
Okay, well then, can somebody get him, Madam Clerk, can you have someone call him to get him back, and we will move on to Dr. Will Ross?
Will do.
Madam Clerk? All right,
Can
thank
you
you.
hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can. I'll call him now.
All right, thank you. So then we have Dr. Will Ross here. He is, let me get this right, he is the chairman of the Joint Board of Health and Hospital. He is a medical doctor, and he also has, let me make sure I get it right here, a master's, because that's what I want him to explain to me. A master's in public health, is that right, Dr. Ross?
That's correct.
Okay. Dr. Ross, thank you for being here with us today. I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you serving the city in your capacity as the chairman of the Joint Board of Health and Hospitals. And can you tell me a little bit about yourself, just so people know about you? I've read all your stuff, so I do, and I've known you for a lot of years, but I'd like for the people who will watch this later to know who Dr. Ross is.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Alderwoman Tyus, for the invitation. Thank you, Alderwoman Spencer, for the invitation. And I really speak on behalf of those who support public health throughout the region. I am a professor of medicine, an endowed professor of medicine at Washington University School of Medicine. I'm a kidney specialist. I have actually a triple role. I have one role as a clinician. I spent the past month, in fact, in the hospital during the COVID crisis in the ICU. I have a second role as administrator. I serve as associate dean for diversity at the School of Medicine, and I work on cultural awareness, recruitment of students, residents, training programs to promote cultural humility across the campus. I have a third role as the principal officer for community partnerships. In that role, I really engage the community and the medical school around issues of public health and community health. And that includes serving on a number of important commissions as well as working on efforts both here statewide as well as globally, particularly in my work in Haiti and Ethiopia. And so I have a number of roles, but for the most part, they all focus on this issue of promoting diversity in medicine and addressing health equity in medicine. I think that's the best way of reducing what I do.
Okay. And so you are a medical doctor, that's correct?
Yes.
And you are licensed?
That is correct.
And where are you licensed?
In the state of Missouri.
Okay, are you licensed in any other states?
No.
Have you ever been licensed any place else?
In Tennessee during my training.
Okay, so then, and I guess I remember you when you first moved to St. Louis. I think I do anyway. So how long have you lived in St. Louis?
I've been here since, well, I attended medical school at Washington University from 1980 to 1984. I then went to do some training at Vanderbilt, and I came back to Washington University in 1987, and I've been here since that time, working closely with our community, even as a fellow.
So we crossed. So I graduated from law school, 87 from WashU. So I guess I remember you when you first came back here. So I didn't know you when you were at medical school at WashU. So, and so you said, so while you were in Tennessee, you got a license?
Yes, that's correct.
And then I know as a lawyer, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, so when I was training at Vanderbilt Medical Center, I was licensed in Tennessee from 1984 to 87. When I left Tennessee to do a research fellowship here at Washington University, obviously I terminated my license in Tennessee. I voluntarily terminated.
Okay, and I know as a lawyer, they have what's called reciprocity, that if you practice for a certain amount of time, they will let you pay through the bar and you can then just become licensed here. Is that what happened when you were in Tennessee, or did you have to redo everything all over when you came to Missouri?
You redo everything. When you move from state to state, you have to go through a complete separate application process.
Well, that's interesting because I went online and I called board here at the state of Missouri, and they do have a reciprocity for doctors. I can share that with you. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Well, I wasn't aware. That wasn't the case back in 1984.
Oh, well, that's a few years ago, okay? But yeah, they do have a reciprocity for doctors now for the state of Missouri, because I just was interested in that. And I told you my cousin's a doctor, and I also been using her with some of my research, and her husband's a doctor, and she pointed me to that, and they actually do have something online. And with lawyers, you have to have practice for so long. You still have to then do some other things, but they will recognize reciprocity for certain states. And I know with lawyers, it's not for every state that will do that, but Missouri does have a reciprocity program. And I know with lawyers, they do Illinois and Kansas, usually the adjoining states. They're pretty easy at doing that. But anyway, so how long have you been the chairman of the Joint Boards of Health and Hospitals?
This is actually going into my this is my seventh year.
Oh my goodness, okay. And how do you have time to eat with all these things that you do? First of all, you are a busy person. And you were appointed originally by Mayor Francis Slay?
That's correct.
And then you were reappointed by Mayor Cruzen, is that correct?
That's correct.
And just like I spoke with the city councilor about taking an oath of office, do you remember that you also took an oath of office?
I did.
Okay, and I actually have your oath also. And basically, it's pretty much the same thing that I said about the city councilor. It says the same thing about upholding ordinances in the charter, and that you have no disqualifications, and that you fit all the qualifications to become for your position as the chairman. Is that correct? Pretty much. Am I paraphrasing it pretty much the same?
Yes.
Okay. And so what do you do as the chairman of the Joint Boards of Health and Hospitals?
Essentially, the role of the chair is to provide advice to the director on behalf of the board, to review policies of the health department, and where necessary to make recommendations on policy changes to the director. I serve the Board of Health is an advisory board. It's not a fiduciary board, so we make recommendations to the director, but they really are advisory recommendations.
And so the Joint Health and Hospital, is that there is a board of health and there is a board of hospital, and so you meet jointly. Is that what happened?
That's correct.
Okay. And as I go through, I printed out all these people, very distinguished people here. I'm just looking at Keon L. Gilbert, Dr. PH, MA, MPA. What is a Dr. PH? Is that a doctor?
Doctor of Public Health. Yes,
Okay, and an MA is what?
What's that?
What is MA?
A master's, just is a master's.
And then an MPA is what?
Master's of, did you say MPA?
MP as in Paul, A as in Apple.
Public Administration, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Okay, and then I'm looking at Susan Kendig. Is that her last name?
Correct.
And she has an MSN. Is that Masters of Nursing?
She has a yes, Master's of Nursing.
Then a JD. I know what that is.
Correct.
And then that's a Juris Doctorate. That's correct.
Correct.
And then WHNT -BC. I don't know what that is. You know?
No, I'm not so sure what you're reading. So.
Okay, I'm reading. So when you go online, it lists all your credentials behind every person who is a member of the health or the hospital board. Okay, and so she has a lot of initials behind her name. So I'm trying to get educated as. So I thought you might be able to help me. What about a FAANP?
She is a fellow of her respective board. So a fellow is a distinguished is a statement saying that she is distinguished among her peers.
Okay.
So
All right. And I really like this board because it's diverse. It's got women, men, Asians, African Americans. I like when I see committees and boards like that. So that is speaking to your thoughts about inclusion. I don't know if you had anything to do with the makeup of this board, but I'm really proud to see that. Are you able to make nominations, or are you able to recommend to the mayors who sits on this board?
So yeah, so the board makes recommendations. The recommendations are then forwarded to the mayor.
Okay. All right. And so I wanted you to come here because in your role as the chairman of Joint Boards of Health and Hospital, and as I said, and I've heard you and I've read the articles about your fierce support of Dr. Echols. And I keep hearing you talk about that he's overly qualified. I heard several people say that. So in law school, I want to give you an example of overly qualified who can't run for things or can't do things. President Barack Obama has been the president. He's been a U.S. senator, and he's been a state senator. But if he would move to the city of St. Louis today and say he wanted to run for any of the offices of the Board of Aldermen that have to run in March, he could not run. And the reason why he could not run is because one of the requirements of the charter is that you have lived in the city for 3 years and you've been a resident of your ward for 1 year that you are running for. So surely he would be more than qualified for the position. The question becomes, does he fulfill the requirements under the charter? Do you agree that there are two different things of being qualified and fulfilling requirements?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so when you came here and you had been a doctor, you were already qualified to be a doctor, but you still had to fulfill the requirements of the board here in the state of Missouri in order to be a licensed doctor here. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so when you're talking about Dr. Echols' qualifications, you're not speaking to if he fulfills the requirement of the charter. You're just saying, as a fellow doctor, you believe that he is a qualified person for the position, but not necessarily under the charter. Is that fair?
I had a different interpretation of the charter reading. My reading concluded that he would be, he would have met the credentials to be director.
And so which of the three credentials would he meet? Because City Council said his understanding he didn't. Which one is it that is your understanding that he meets?
So, so Dr. Echols actually had a 2-year training with the Centers for Disease Control. And his particular, it was with the Population Health Training Program. And in the eyes of those of us who teach public health, we think that is one of the most rigorous training programs in the country. The CDC is not an accredited public health program, but the training program itself is tantamount to the level of training one would obtain in a public health program. I spent 6 years as a consultant for the Centers for Disease Control. In 2015, a committee drafted a white paper looking at public health pipeline programs, the ones that were appropriate in terms of producing top-notch public health leaders in America. And this program was cited. I was the chair of the committee, and I wrote that white paper. And I worked closely with the director of that program, Dr. Denise Koo. And so I can say, based on my extensive knowledge of public health training programs, that this program is robust enough to qualify anyone to serve in a public health leadership position.
So again, I'm going to ask you, so then I have to ask you a question. Have you ever attended law school?
No.
Ever taken the bar?
No.
So you're not a lawyer?
No, I'm not.
I am. Julian Bush is, right?
Yes.
So your interpretation was that of a doctor, not a lawyer. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay, and so would you be surprised to know I'm a pretty good lawyer? I actually went over to the CDC and started pulling their records. Would you be surprised that's the kind of lawyer I am?
I've heard that you're a pretty good lawyer.
Okay, so in searching the CDC for Dr. Echols, one of the things they have all different kinds of things, and then they list who graduated from these programs, and they have them year after year. So I went back to many of, let's see, 2015, 2014. I went back, and they actually have pictures of who graduated in the list. Are you surprised at that?
No.
Okay. And so I couldn't find that where Dr. Echols had graduated from any of these programs that you speak.
Typically, after these programs, students receive a certificate saying that they've completed the program.
Okay, so I got the pilot program. I got the preventive medicine residency and fellowship. I have the population health training, which is, I believe, a thing that's listed on Dr. Echols' curriculum vitae. And as I said before, none of this shows where there was a graduation, and you're trying to make it an equivalency. And in fact, they talk about, if you go on to that site, it talks about how you then could get a master's of public health or public administration. I can't remember one or the other. I get confused a little bit because I'm not a doctor, and I don't even play one on TV. But they speak to how you would try to get an equivalency, and there is actual action that you can take. And are you surprised at that?
Well, there are a number of these pipeline programs, and they're geared toward different constituencies. Some are geared toward students who want to then move on. Some are geared toward physicians who want to get more high-level training without needing to go and obtain more formal classroom tutorial. And so there.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand that, but so they then go, and I would invite you to go yourself, go onto the CDC and look at it. They tell you about how you can do these equivalencies. And so is it your statement that Dr. Echols has done this?
It is my understanding that he participated in the program and received a certificate. That's my understanding.
And did you see the certificate?
No, I have not.
Did you vet him at all?
In terms of searching
his qualifications under the charter?
I essentially reviewed his resume that was extent. Yes.
I understand, but so that's why we have people who vet people. And that's why I wanted Richard Franks to come and talk about how we vet and why we have that and why we do that. And that is a part of the Board of Aldermen that we oversee. A lot of mayor gets appointments a lot of times with the consent of the Board of Aldermen. With her directors, that does not happen. She can appoint them herself, but there are still requirements under the charter. And just to go back again, you did take a sworn oath under the charter that you would uphold the charter, not what you thought or what you wanted to subjectively insert, but the requirements under the charter.
That is correct.
And you did hear Julian Bush, who is our city councilor, state what the charter requirements were.
And I will certainly defer to the councilor, to Mr. Bush. Absolutely.
Okay, I understand. It's people that I like to, I think are really, like I said, President Obama would be really great at the Board of Aldermen. He just couldn't run because the charter doesn't allow him to. And that's how black and white it is, okay? And sometimes we don't think that's a fair thing. And that, what you do is what we did in 2002. You then get together either as a citizens initiative or you have aldermen introduce something, put it out to the voters, and then let them say if they want to change it. It is not my job or your job to change the requirements of the charter. Would you agree?
I agree. I was just offering you my interpretation.
I understand. And so I'll try to, I'm trying to tone it down. Okay, I feel like I haven't got to practice law in a long time, so I kind of feel like, ooh, this is court again. So I do understand. I understand there are people, like I said, there are people who want President Obama to be the vice presidential choice so he can be in line to be the president again, because I've heard people speak to, well, it says the U.S. Constitution said he can't run for a third term, but what if he was the vice president and he became the president because of some reason? So I understand what our desires and wishes are. I also understand that when I gave my oath, it was to make sure that the charter was followed. Since you've been here for so long, you were here when Melba Moore and Pam Walker was here. Is that correct?
That's
or were
correct.
you here for both of them?
Both.
Okay. Would you be? I'm sorry.
No, I didn't say anything. No, I didn't say anything.
Okay. So I actually have reached out to both of them because, and we'll get to this. I don't want to get too deep into it, but neither of them were able to be the director of health. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware, yes.
And they were not able to be the director of health. Why? Are you aware of that?
I gather because of the physician issue. I don't think, and neither one had the formal public health training.
So it was not the physician's issue because it had been changed, but they didn't meet the minimum qualifications of the other thing.
Right.
And so is it your position that men and women should be treated equally?
Of course.
You better say that with all these women on this committee. Okay, so if women were not allowed to take a position because, quote unquote, they didn't meet the minimum qualifications, how do we then say anybody else who does not meet the minimum qualifications can do that? Can you explain that to me?
I didn't review Melba Moore's or Pam Rice's application at the time, and so I can't comment objectively on why they received that acting directorship.
Okay, and I know you can't, but my question is, if you find out that these two women were not able to take this position because, and one of them, Melba Moore, actually, you're talking about acting, she's given me permission to release this, or else I wouldn't, but she actually sent me a statement. She actually was the health commissioner for a number of years, and then was asked by the former mayor to accept the position as an acting health director, but she was never paid for health director, and the personnel director will back me up on this. And so she did two jobs for a long time until she left here, but only as the health commissioner. Were you aware of that?
I'm not aware of all those details. I'm aware that she served as both. I'm aware, I was there, of course, at the time when she served as commissioner, and I, of course, was there when she transitioned to director. It was my understanding that she was serving as both director and commissioner. But
So she never transitioned to director. I want to make that clear. That's what, so that she was only acting in the capacity to try while the mayor was.
Transition to acting director. That's what I meant. Right.
Right, exactly. But she never got paid the salary for director.
That I don't know.
Did you know that? Oh, well, I'm telling you that, okay? She's authorized me to talk about this, or I would not be talking about this. And pretty much it's public knowledge about what people make, okay? Because if we work for the city or the state or whatever, our salaries are public knowledge. But she did not. And Pam Walker also left here. She came, and so hers was a little different, but she stayed acting director for a long time and ultimately did not meet the minimum qualifications and also left. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware of that, yes.
Okay. All right. Alderwoman Spencer, are you still here? If she's not, I would like to first ask Alderwoman Spencer. Okay.
Yes.
Did you have any questions of Dr. Will Ross?
And not at this time. Dr. Ross, thank you for sharing your time with us today. Your commitment to our community is beyond my thanks. I mean, the amount of time you spend serving our community is second to almost to no one. So thank you for your commitment. I don't have any questions, and I appreciate your time here with us today.
Thank you, Alderwoman Spencer.
Okay. Alderwoman Green, do you have any questions of Dr. Ross?
No questions.
Alderwoman,
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Howard, do you have any questions of Dr. Ross?
No, I don't. Thank you. Nice meeting you, Dr. Ross. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Alderman Todd, do you have any questions for Dr. Ross? Alderman Todd, do you have any questions? You're muted. Unmute.
No,
Do you have any questions for Dr.
No, I don't have any questions, but I want to thank Dr. Ross for coming.
Okay. Alderwoman Engrossment, do you have any questions for Dr. Ross?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Dr. Ross, thank you again. You've been extremely helpful during this COVID crisis. And the fact that you are handling a patient load and doing your regular job and then serving this capacity is noticed and appreciated by me. I guess my one question would be possibly a bit loaded, but we've had a lot of, I think, candid conversations. Do you feel like if you are in a position where you disagreed with Dr. Echols or the way the city was handling a situation, that you have the power or not necessarily even the power, but the belief that without retaliation, you can act on something like that? Because I feel like, especially with the unhoused community, we are on the same page and definitely on a different page than the administration and Dr. Echols.
So yes, I have a close professional relationship with Dr. Echols. We agreed the majority of times. There are times when we don't, and and I make recommendations, and it's handled in a very professional way.
Okay, I appreciate that. No other questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Ross, again, for your service to the community. It's unparalleled.
Okay, both myself and Alderwoman Green were on the Rules Committee, so I'm going. Alderwoman Martin, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Alderwoman Navarro, do you have any questions?
No questions. I also just want to thank Dr. Ross for his time and just for all of his service to our city, especially right now. So thank you very much, and no questions.
Welcome.
Alderwoman Rice, do you have any questions of Dr. Ross?
I don't have any questions, but I do also want to echo all of our gratitude for the work that you're doing hands-on with patients and all of the work that you've done over the decades for the city of St. Louis, particularly with our unhoused population and with an eye towards equity as well. So thank you for all of that and for your service to the city.
Thank you.
Okay, and Alderman Todd was also on engrossment and rules. I do want to follow up again, Dr. Ross. I think I read an article in the American paper, so I don't want it to be a secret to anybody that I am not happy with the way COVID has been treated in 63115 and the lack of testing. 3/4 of my ward is in 63115, the ward that I represent. And I early on tried to get some kind of testing. And I used to be a science major. Before I started all this law stuff, I actually was in a dental program. And so what I always learned is that data and science leads decisions. Is that something that you're familiar with at all? That you follow, the decisions are made by data and science. That's something you've ever heard of?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so even though I'm not from St. Louis, I've been here since 1978 and entrenched myself here and moved to North St. Louis on purpose, lived in the Central West End, lived in South St. Louis, and moved to North St. Louis. My husband is from this area. I'm very familiar with it, a long-term alder person. And so I know the density of the 63115. People think everything in North St. Louis is poor and homeless. I'm appalled when people say that to me because it's not. And I've had that said to me and just irritating to me. People work here. They want to enjoy the quality of life. And so I knew that we had a much more dense population because this was the middle class and upper middle class and working class Black people before there was integration. So a lot of people still own their homes. It's one of the reasons I'm still here fighting for them. And so I tried to get something in 63115 and called up all the stakeholders who represent this area. Everybody was on board and was summarily dismissed as not going to do that. Now, what then happened is when the hotspots came out, well, look at what the first thing that we see is one of the high spots. And I want to thank the Alderwoman from the 20th, but she even sent me a note because 63115 and 63103, I think, were really, when they came out, really hot spots. As in your position as a doctor, wouldn't that have, and people started talking to me and saying, hey, Sharon, you were right on target about that there needs to be some kind of testing. And I was watching everything because I was watching the governor. They put a drive-through testing down in Sedalia, Missouri at the fairgrounds and out in Washington, Missouri. My question is, so at this point, I read in the article, I think that you said that even that stakeholders should have some say so about what happened and that it should be jointly worked together. And I thought that has always been your position since I've known you. Has your position changed on that?
No, of course not.
Okay. And so if the first data came out saying 63115 is a hotspot, can you explain to me as a doctor why we wouldn't test there? Or 63103, or it could be, so let me make it clear. It could be the 16th ward, the 12th ward, the 24th ward. If the data says this is a place that's hot, why wouldn't that be the premier place we would test?
Well, we actually, the city was actually quite on target in terms of actually stratifying data according to race so we can actually determine those hot spots. And Dr. Echols brought that data to the board. Dr. Echols also brought to the board the mapping of the data so we can actually identify those hot spots. This is about the same time, early March, when I had personally concluded that the COVID pandemic would disproportionately affect the African-American community. I had every reason to believe that was the case. And so that's why I put in that editorial that North St. Louis required more testing sites. We carried that information to Dr. Echols, and I think his response was right on target in terms of working with the data to get first Affinia and then CareSTL. And so that was, I'm not aware of any other discrepancies to that. Based on what I know in my interactions, the testing sites came on board according to how the data came on. So let's.
I'm sorry. So You didn't hear the data about 63115 and 63103?
Oh, I have the data, Alderwoman Tyus.
And was that a hotspot?
I have to go back and see which one was identified first, but I would.
The 103 and 115 both came out with like the largest in the city. The first thing, the first reports by zip code. Those were the 2 zip codes. I can tell you that. And I'll email it over to you.
Well, I'll take you at face value, but I would have to go back and actually look at the map and see which ones emerged first. But I'll take.
And so you just, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I said I'll accept that may be the reality, but I don't have those. I don't have the map in front of me, so I can't say which came up first.
No problem. I actually talked to Dr. Echols that I was going to map it. I map everything at this board. Hello?
Yes.
I'm sorry. All of a sudden, my camera was shut off, and so it's coming back up now. I don't know what's happening here. So if you can hear me, I'll still ask questions if you don't mind while my camera comes up. I don't know why this is the second time that's done that. But I'm dialed in on my phone. That's why I dial in on my phone. So you're telling me that if 63115 was one of the first hotspots along with 63103, that there shouldn't have maybe been a different effort about how to test the people in that area?
My personal perspective is that if those emerge as a hotspot, then the most important thing is to identify a testing site that would be accessible to those areas.
Okay, so one of the things you just mentioned is one of the things that I have a question about, and that's, you said Aphenia and Care St. Louis?
Correct.
And so those are the people that are doing all the testing in all of St. Louis?
No, those were the first sites in North St. Louis that came on board. That came on in terms of areas that had a higher proportion of African American residents, particularly because of the concern that you're raising.
Okay, so when you say came on board, could you please explain to me what that means?
That meant that the first site on North in that area was the site on 1717 Biddle Street, the Aphenia site, which is of course near downtown, is close to a homeless center, a large homeless center, and has a significant African American population. That was the first site. The second one was again, this is data that Dr. Echols was bringing us. The second one was the site, the CARE-SCL site I can't remember, it's near Martin Luther King. Then
I know, in the 22nd Ward.
Right, and then there was a site that was, a CARE-SCL site that was north of that one. And then by then, after these sites were stood up, then there were resources then to expand the sites themselves, the FQHCs themselves, the Federal Qualified Health Centers themselves, at that time then secured resources to expand further. But it was imperative early on to really stand up those sites in North St. Louis. And that's
so. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, so that's where the initial effort was. And
so what I'm hearing is, and what I heard from Dr. Echols is this thing about homeless in North St. Louis. And no disrespect, homeless is a citywide problem, not a North St. Louis problem, okay? I live in North St. Louis. When people equate that there, then they dismiss the fact that there's a middle income, working income, and other people who live in North St. Louis, that also senior people that's been here for years. So when you say that, but the outbreak was in 63115, what I hear is that was where, and what I was told is that was already where they had sites. They had sites set up already. But those sites that they set up were not set up because of this COVID that was going to, if you're a host, I need to start this meeting. Okay. I'm sorry. They won't let me in for some reason. It was not set up for the pandemic that we're going through. It was set up because they were poor in that area and they didn't have any health care, so they were going to set up there. So what that says to the people who live in my community where it was a big outbreak, and what I've heard expressed over and over, is so then we don't count, okay? We got the greatest outbreak. When you have a transient population, please don't try to say that that is our responsibility in North St. Louis, or it's even in Southeast St. Louis, that it is the entire city's responsibility. And so if you're going to then say we're going to give all the resources for North St. Louis first to that area based on being that it's homeless, transient, or whatever, and poor, then most certainly I guess all of us with two nickels to rub together should move the heck out of North St. Louis, okay? Because that is not following the data. That is following a political agenda to me. If the data said 63115 was where the breakout was in 63103, then that was equally important. These are people who pay their bills, pay taxes, and do all this stuff, and that they keep getting ignored and trivialized as though they don't exist.
Yeah, well, the health department should be guided by data, both data on the ground and surveillance data. And I can't comment on the rest because you're referring to a personal conversation that I wasn't privy to.
Oh no, it doesn't have to be personal. Like I said, and I should have had it ready for you. Again, the first data that came out, and I sent it all over my ward, was about 63103 and 63115. So then I was shocked that it went every place else. So then that goes back to the fact that we talked about these corporate entities being.
Sharon, Alderwoman Tyus, you went on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello? Okay, so yes. 63103 and 63115, and you said that Affinia and Care St. Louis were the first people to join in? Is that what you said?
I said the first ones that were stood up in North St. Louis were the site on Biddle and the Care STL site near Martin Luther King and Newstead, I think, in that area. Those were the first. But
neither one of those. But again, neither one of those was 63103 or 63115.
I can't comment. I mean, there were a lot of moving parts and a lot of resources that had to be deployed according to need. And so there was the issue of resource allocation. I can't comment on that because Alderwoman Tyus, I need to go back and look at that data. I don't have that in front of me. And so I'm at a disadvantage in commenting on that.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you again, that was the data, and it's the good thing about it, it's a timestamp, you will see it. So I want an explanation of why 63103 and 63115 didn't become priorities. And I will tell you also that the problem that we have in our community, I don't live in 115, I live right adjacent to it, I live in 113, is that if you do not test, then you're starting to look at, oh yeah, we're doing better, but we're not testing in the hot spot. That makes no sense to me, okay? To me, the first place you test, and then you can have a way to prove that you're going down is you test in those hot spots. Years ago, I took a statistics class, and one of the things, I still have this book, it's called How to Lie with Statistics. And what you do is, when you want your statistics to go down, you don't test those places. You don't bring that in. And then people can say, well, look at how the city is doing, but you haven't tested a whole place where they have high confirmation. So that makes no sense to me, except for that we are following a corporate path versus a health path. And so I am surprised when you tell me you don't know about 63115, and I know you have a lot of things to do. Okay.
I know a lot about 63115. I did the report, the North St. Louis report in 2007. I've written a book about poverty in place, which reviews 63115 and all those reports. And I worked with my colleague who did his report, The Forsake of All. And so
So my thing was not that you didn't know about the zip code, but that you didn't know that it was one of the initial hotspots. If you let me finish, was that I was surprised that you didn't remember that being one of the initial hotspots, okay? Not that you didn't know again, okay? So I'm sorry, Alderwoman Spencer.
Madam Chair, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I'm getting some messages from my committee members. Many of them have other commitments today, and we were wondering if we could, I know we still have several other people that need to speak, and so it might be helpful if we
no problem. So what I would do, Dr. Ross, as soon as we get off of this, I will send you the data, and then I will ask you, how does that come up that we did not address it? Because as I said, I mean, that was the first thing. And then the other thing is I would like to just ask you about the how the different testing is done, because and we can do this at off this air, because I also have been reading the articles about testing and two different types of testing and why we may not be getting correct data. And my concern is that we open up this place, and then we already saw what happened out in in Chicago, and then in Middle Missouri, with people going back out and having a great time, and then we have another outbreak. And so my constituents have steadily called me and says, we don't feel like we're being treated fairly. Why are we getting all this data about how we are having an outbreak and we don't have anything? And when you talk about financing, my last thing is I want to know, did it not ever occur to you all that the city of St. Louis, which pays for every sports facility in the world, could have just paid? Because I think it costs like $110,000 or $120,000 a month to have a drive-through facility. Why wouldn't we just suggest that we set one up on Lexington School in 63115 or the church, and that we do it that way, and we have drive-up, and that the city pay for it like we do with everything else? Dr. Ross?
I don't know how to answer that. I think, again, at the inception of this pandemic, the goal was to pour resources in as quickly as possible based on need. And so I appreciate that. I certainly appreciate looking at the data and review. That's all I can say. I really look forward to talking to you afterwards.
Chairwoman Tyus, and say that over the last few months, I've had several questions for Dr. Ross, in his capacity as chair of the health board, and has been accommodating to hear those kind of questions and things in that capacity. But perhaps while we're limited on time today, we could move forward with the subject at hand before we start losing committee members. I worry that that we may lose folks soon. And I would, if you're done with Dr. Ross, just like to offer him an opportunity to add any thoughts that he may think may be helpful to us as we consider the matter before us today.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Alderwoman Spencer. This is a time when St. Louisans have to make decisions about both leadership and service, and the bigger picture of assuring that our residents indeed are reaching their full health potential. And I would ask that whatever, this deliberate body I respect, but I would ask that as you continue the deliberations, you really think about the higher need. How do we continue to provide the greatest leadership, the greatest service to our community, particularly at this time, particularly when we have vulnerable citizens at risk? How do we ensure that we have the appropriate leadership going forward? I'm hoping that will be, that larger decision, which would move you to make whatever rational decision you choose to make. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And I want to say, Dr. Ross has always returned my calls. That's not been the problem. He and I have talked all the time. Anytime I've called him, he calls me back. So he knows that's not the problem. My problem is Dr. Echols only returned one of my emails and one call. That is the problem. So it is not Dr. Ross. He and I have been knowing each other, and I would say friendly, for a number of years. So Do you feel that I badgered you?
No, I think that your questions were right on target.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. If Mr. Richard Franks, is he here? Mr. Frank?
Chairwoman Tyus, I do see him. Does anybody have the ability to text him or email him and see if he's was?
I do, I guess.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Oh. Director Frank, is that you?
Yes, it is. Sorry, I apologize. I've been having, help me. I'm having problems with my camera and also with my phone, but I'm hoping the honorable alderpersons can hear me now.
Yes, we can.
The honorable
Great.
and otherwise, we can all hear you.
Thank you. And I apologize for the camera, but I have really shaggy hair, so you're not missing anything.
Hello, Mr. Frank, can you hear me?
Yes,
This
I
is
can.
Alderwoman. Okay, thank you so much for being here. You know, I've reached out to you several weeks ago because I had some concerns about our charter and civil service and how things work. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And we actually had phone conversations, and then I also sent you written correspondence about certain things.
Yes.
Okay. And first of all, would you just tell me, for the people who don't know, because I do, what say your name, what your position is, and how you became the personnel director, please?
Yes, my name is Richard Frank. I've been director of personnel since June 1st of 2004. As a civil service employee, I was involved in the competitive testing for director of personnel when former director Duffy left. The Civil Service Commission tested a number of different applicants, and then the top 3 names were certified to former Mayor Slay. Eventually, I ended up being appointed by Mayor Slay to the position, served a working test period, and have been director since.
Okay. And as your position, and you said that, so in order to become the personnel director, you had to go through civil service?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and they vetted you in civil service?
Yes, they did.
Okay, and to be the personnel director, there are qualifications that you have to meet?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then, and you said that the civil service then, what at that time did they send 2, 3, 5, 6, how many people were sent over for Mayor Slay to choose? 3?
3 at that time, Alderwoman.
And now I think we do 6?
Yes, Alderwoman.
Right. Okay, and so in your position as personnel director, and I don't know if you were here when we were talking to the city councilor, but in your position as personnel director, do you vet the mayor's appointees?
No, I do not.
Directors?
No, I do not.
And our directors and commissioners, they are different levels of employees?
Yes, they are.
And commissioner, is that civil service usually?
Typically, the commissioner levels and deputy director levels of civil service. There are a few exceptions, such as the supply commissioner. That is a direct mayoral appointee, but generally speaking, the vast majority of commissioners are civil service.
Okay. And as the personnel director, did you take an oath of office?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and your oath of office is pretty much what you hear me read it to the city councilor, that you would support the charter and that you have qualifications and not subject to any disqualifications in the charter?
Yes, Alderwoman, I was here for the entire meeting.
Okay, so when you are vetting employees, do you use civil service and or the charter and to look for qualifications to vet people?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and so is it your understanding that in order to be a commissioner of health, that you would have to go through civil service and be vetted?
That is correct.
Okay, so in the letter that I sent you, I asked you a number of questions. One of them was, as of today's date, and this letter was sent back in May May 13th. I asked you if there was a health director for the city of St. Louis. And I'm sorry, the health commissioner of the city of St. Louis.
Yes, you did ask that.
And what was your reply?
That there is not.
And when is the last time we had a health commissioner?
It was with the departure of former Commissioner Melba Moore.
And that was back in what, 2000 and, do you remember what date, not exact date, was it 17?
About 2 years ago. Several years ago.
Okay. And did you hear me talk about Ms. Moore as her capacity as health commissioner and how she had 2 jobs, but that she was really only classified as a health commissioner and was not given the health director's job?
You're correct.
Okay. And she wasn't paid as a health director either, was she?
No, she was not.
Okay. And she did not meet the minimum qualifications, and so she could not have that position. Is that correct?
That was the position of administration at the time.
Okay. And also there was a Pam Walker that also was. Now, can you enumerate for me, Pam Walker, was she the acting health director?
Yes, she was.
Okay. And she stayed for a while, and then she ultimately was not given the position or a permanent position or a title because she also didn't meet the minimum qualifications. Is that right?
That was the position of administration, yes.
Okay. So when you vet commissioners, can you tell me what the vetting process looks like and what actually happened?
Well, typically what would happen for a high-level commissioner is we would have, first of all, a set of structured, what we call assembled interview questions, which are standardized. We would go through any other kind of process we deemed appropriate to determine what the qualifications were for the person. That might include a written exam. More typically, we might do sort of a panel interview. We might do peer reviews. We might do any number of different types of testing mechanisms. And then finally, for the high-level positions, we typically ask that the people produce documents verifying their education. For instance, if it's an attorney, we ask that you submit copies, of your diplomas, from law school, et cetera, proof of bar registration, educational credentials. For instance, I had to do that, in the final round of interviews with the Civil Service Commission and the mayor. It depends on the position, though.
Okay. And so when you say, if you're like for lawyers, you would ask them to submit their licenses, their, if they have for me, I have a bar card, so pretty easy to show. You don't get a bar card if you're not licensed in the state of Missouri.
It would depend on the level of the position. We have attorney trainees. We would work with the department director to determine what type of documentation they would like us to provide for them, prior to certifying the top 6 names. In other cases, for instance, like with airport positions, the airport itself will finalize the vetting process by doing like an FAA background check, et cetera. So we work cooperatively with the various department heads, but typically we make sure that the people do have the proper amount of training, experience, meet the minimum qualifications, and then get a passing score on whatever type of examination we have in order to proceed in the process.
So then a director could not just appoint themselves a director without going through civil service?
No,
appoint themselves health commissioner without going through civil service?
No, they could not.
Okay. And I note that Section 21 in the Article 8 Civil Service is about false statements under oath. No person knowingly and willfully shall make under oath any false statement in any application or other statement filled with or in any proceeding before the Director of Personnel or the Civil Service Commission or in any investigation conducted by the Director or the Commission. So that is one of the violations of civil service. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So what would normally happen if you found out a person had made a false statement and obtained a job?
In the civil service system, if a person falsifies, makes what we call a material misrepresentation, they would be dismissed.
So is so if the civil service and or the charter required that you have a law license or a medical license and you be licensed and you didn't have one, would that be considered material?
Well, the qualifications, if I can respond to that, it would depend on, the exact wording of what the qualifications were. For instance, when we announced for firefighter, we asked that they be able to obtain an EMT license in the first 11 months. Other times, if it requires a bachelor's degree, we will work with, we'll work with the department directors to make sure that they have the necessary credentials. But if there's a material misstatement, let's say that someone says that we actually had a person who claimed they had 15 years of experience and they found out that 12 of the years they were in prison and were not working at the organization that they said. We set them up for pre-termination and their appointing authority dismissed them.
Okay, so if I wanted to be the city councilor, and I know you don't vet the city councilor, so I'm gonna take this off, and then you found out that I said I had a law license and I was licensed and I wasn't, would that be a material misstatement of fact?
Well, I wouldn't opine on any of what we call the accepted positions.
Okay, I'm trying to give you room not to be on the exact point, but okay, if you want to wiggle, I'll get tighter.
But I would say that if a position such as attorney 1 or attorney 2 called for a JD and you did not have it, but you said that you did, we would consider that to be a material misrepresentation, and we would advise the appointing authority to take appropriate action.
Okay. Now, as the personnel director, the mayor could have approached you and asked you for some temporary appointments, right? Is that how it works? Can you explain that to me, how that works?
The civil service rules allow for various types of temporary appointments. One is an emergency appointment of 30 days. Another type is a limited term, which is up to a year. There's a term appointment, which we often use for grants when we know that the position may not last forever, may not be permanent. We want to be upfront and transparent and advise the people that the position is of certain duration. And then finally, there's provisional appointments. And a provisional appointment is a situation where the person, again, meets the minimum qualifications. The appointing authority would request that I allow that person to be appointed for up to 6 months. It can be extended for 3 months. But in all the aforementioned instances, I have to have my staff review their qualifications, and they have to meet the minimum qualifications and then compete for the examination, be certified in the top 6 before they could be appointed.
Okay, and have you ever been asked to vet Dr. Echols?
I have not been asked to vet Dr. Echols. On occasion, the Board of Aldermen, for instance, or some of the elected officials, including the mayor, have asked me to advertise for them. In the case of the Director of Health and Hospitals, for instance, we were asked to give assistance to advertise the position, assist in the developing of the draft job announcement, take the applications, and then based on those applications, we broadly grouped them into groups that looked like the best potential candidates and send those over to the mayor's office for the final steps which we take. And we had no role in that whatsoever.
Okay, and in my correspondence to you, I asked about the different classifications of the Commissioner of Health and the Director of Health and Hospital, and you sent me over both classifications. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and are they the same, the requirements to be the Commissioner of Health and the Director of Health and Hospital?
They're slightly different. And the main difference is, well, there's 2 main differences. The announcement for Health Commissioner has not been done since, oh my gosh, I believe it was early February perhaps, or January 2001, prior to my tenure. And that calls for either, graduation from an accredited school of medicine as an MD, and then the ability to be, licensed as a physician. or a master's in public health. The position, as Julian far more eloquently than I could have explained, the qualifications for the health director are threefold. There's 3 different pathways, as I understand it. And again, I would just echo the remarks of the city council in terms of what the charter specifies as the minimum qualifications for director of health and hospitals.
Okay, I have some other things, but to be expedient, I'm going to let other people ask questions, and if they then have to leave, then I have a few more things that I'd like to talk to you about. Chairwoman Spencer. Chairwoman Spencer. Did you have any questions, Doctor?
I don't. Thank you, Chairwoman.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Tyus.
Frank. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Did you say you had questions of Director Franks?
Thank you, Chairwoman Tyus.
Personnel Director?
I do not.
Okay. Okay, Alderwoman Green, do you have any questions? Alderwoman Green.
Not at the moment. Thank you. Sorry, I was muted.
Okay,
Still.
no problem. Alderwoman Howard.
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Frank.
Okay, Alderman Todd.
I know I don't have any questions. Thank you so much, Mr. Frank, for appearing before the committee.
Thank you, Alderman.
Alderwoman Engrossment.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't have any, that's a lie. I have one question. Richard, thanks so much for being with us. Do you think under the civil service rules of hiring that Dr. Echols would meet the expectations or qualifications necessary to fulfill this role?
That's an excellent question, Alderwoman. We believe that he quite possibly could, and that is, what we communicated to the mayor. We did not check on his licensure status, but based on his vast experience, impressive array of credentials, graduation from school, which we didn't verify, we listed him in the top 5 candidates as being a strong, I believe the exact wording was quite possibly could, and because we did not do that final vetting, but that's an excellent question. Thank you.
Okay, yep. Thanks so much for all you do. Quite possibly could is, I'm gonna jot that down in my notes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Alderwoman Martin.
I have no questions, thank you.
Alderwoman Navarro.
I have no questions, thank you.
Alderwoman Rice.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. One question I had was whether or not an acting position would also be vetted the same way through the Department of Personnel?
That's, again, an excellent question. I'm good HR people here, Alderwoman. No, an acting person would not, because in fact, while they might have, might have the authority based on HR business practices to, to carry out the role, and they would not actually be on the payroll as a civil service employee, and so we would not vet them and ask them to be go through that process. I've enumerated here that there's only 4 ways to become a temporary person, and that is the emergency appointment, the limited term, the term, and the provisional. And none of those requests were made to me, for Dr. Echols. None of those requests were made to me of Melba Moore nor Pam Walker. So, but an acting is not something that we have in the civil service, other than we have what we call the temporary assignment differential, which the Board of Aldermen graciously approved our recent pay ordinance. Under that scenario, you can get a temporary assignment differential and get a 10% increase in pay. for up to 6 months. But again, you have to meet the minimum qualifications, and my staff does that fully.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question, I just wanted to clarify on the response that you had given to Chairwoman Tyus, the difference between the commissioner and the director. If the commissioner is underneath the purview of civil service, the director is an appointment by the mayor. So what would be the process for hiring someone into the commissioner role?
What would happen, Alderwoman, is the director of health would send me over a requisition. I have done my due diligence in terms of checking to make sure the position is still established in the health department's budget. And at that point, we would consult with the director and start a normal process of advertising for the position, and not just the city journal, but on the internet, Monster, all the local organizations, on a national search probably for a person at that level. And they would have to meet the minimum qualifications, which are very strict. Quite honestly, they're probably too strict in my opinion, because a master's of public health is a very difficult degree to find. St. Louis University used to have one. I defer to Dr. Ross, who knows more about this than I would ever hope to, but I know that there's not as many schools that offer a master of public health. And in fact, interestingly enough, just to share with the committee, Melva Moore and Pam Walker had master's degrees in community health, not in public health. So, things have changed over the years, but it would all start with Dr. Echols asking that of me, and we would start.
Okay. And then for acting positions, for those appointed positions, there's not a preset process for how someone would go about putting someone in as an acting director.
There's nothing that I'm aware of. There, my knowledge and my governance is over the civil service, and that is it. So I have not seen anyone during my tenure, actually be placed on the payroll in 16 years as acting. But it has been done where people have been sworn in as acting, directors when we haven't been able to find a director for a period of time. And I'm not qualified. I'm not an attorney, but there's different concepts that were spoken of in the past. Like prior city councils called a parent authority, and basically it's just to talk about, the government has to go on. And so in these instances, in government, the law kind of recognizes that that a higher level person can sometimes carry out duties of a lower. And that's all. I defer to Julian on that. It's a complex issue, but I'm no attorney.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's and that maybe more of a question for Councilor Bush as well.
Okay, I'll be different him. Thank you. Thank you. And Chairwoman Tyus, I'm not sure it's appropriate to ask at the moment, but my question, I guess, there would be, would an acting director have the same powers under the charter as the director does now? And I'm not sure if Julian is available to answer that question, or if we even want to dive back into that.
Well, I want to tell you that you might look at the director versus the commissioner, because the real power is the commissioner, not the director. So you might want to look at that a little more.
Okay.
And
well, I will hold my question for some more investigation. Thank you.
Okay,
Chairwoman.
I'll send it to you. Okay. Did you have any more questions, Alderwoman?
No, all my questions was answered. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Alderwoman.
I want to circle back for a minute, Mr. Personnel Director. I ask you often about sending me the list of what people make in the city of St. Louis. I like to keep up with that, see what's going on. And the last time I saw the salary for the director of health, it was about $150,000. Do you know what that current salary is 1 year later?
I believe it's slightly over, closest to about $173,500.
Okay. So the director's got approximately a $25,000 salary increase. Is that correct?
About $24,000.
Okay, 24. And you said something about the mayoral inquired and the Dr. Echols was in the top 6. Has this happened since we last spoken? Has the mayor's office reached out to you to maybe speak to you about this? because I didn't hear, before in our conversation, I didn't hear anything about the mayor inquiring and there being some top 6 for the commissioner, health commissioner.
No, not at all. Again, there's only been a few cases where we've had either the mayor or the Board of Aldermen or elected officials ask for assistance and just drafting an announcement to post the job, and then they have final say. We post it as a courtesy on the Department of Personnel website. We will also then collect the resumes, and then they ask us sometimes to summarize the qualifications. We have no authority. We will just say, if upon request, these seem to be the strongest, these seem to be the less strong, et cetera. But no, I've had no contact about any groups or about that position since then.
So when your statement, when Alderwoman Engrossment was talking to you, and you said maybe he could be listening to what his qualifications were told to you, be in the top 6, that was just based on what you had heard, not any personal knowledge of actually any kind of vetting of what Dr. Echols had, or what his education and or job requirements were, or what he had done in the past.
No, you're exactly right, Alderwoman. That I had no knowledge whatsoever. It was my exam manager, Mr. Brian Beckelman. It was way back, I think, in 2017. And again, similar to what we did with the Director of Human Services, and we simply, as a courtesy, received the applications. We were asked to kind of sort through them, but that was it. We got no further involved in the vetting, or we just identified those that looked that they could possibly qualify, and that's as far as it went.
And so I want to go back to the salary for a second, because when I first got elected, a few years before, Mayor Conway had just got the $25,000 salary cap lifted. For years, I don't know if you weren't here, but we had a salary cap and nobody could make more than $25,000. So now I'm looking at a person who started at $150,000 that was not vetted, that does not meet probably the minimum qualifications, and then a year later getting like a $23,000 raise. How does that happen? Can you tell me?
The salaries of the accepted positions are 100% at the discretion of the mayor, provided they are in the appropriate pay grade. So they have to lie within the pay grade for which that position is assigned. If they wish to pay the mayor, if any elected official, I'm not any elected official, but the mayor, the comptroller, if they wanted to pay somebody, more than what the top of the pay range is, they have to send a request to the director.
Okay, so as long as they're in the appropriate pay grade, they can give a little $50,000 raise or whatever, as long as it stays within the pay grade.
Absolutely.
All right. I have no further questions. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Is there any, Chairwoman Spencer, do you have any questions?
I do not have any further questions. Thank you, Chairwoman Tyus.
Is there anyone here that has any further questions for the Personnel Director? Okay. So Dr. Echols is here. I didn't know he was here either. So first I want to apologize to him because I wasn't planning on him being here before we set that we did some basic investigation about what requirements and things was. But since he's here, Chairwoman, do you have a problem if he testifies? Chairwoman Spencer?
I do not. I would defer to Dr. Echols, if he's prepared to do so today. As I mentioned via email to you, I thought it was appropriate that we invite him, given that he's the topic of discussion.
Well, I really intended it more to be about what our rules and things was, but since he's here, I'll always give not only Alder people, but for me, anybody who you feel like that they are a nexus in touch, then they have the right to stay. I still will request probably that he come before our committee anyway, but if he has something he wants to say, I want him to say it. If he doesn't want to do it now, I didn't plan on it, and I wasn't trying to not invite you, Dr. Echols. I was just doing some groundwork before I talked, the committee's talked with you. So if you want to speak, you can. If you don't, that's fine.
I'm sure I'll speak by giving an overview of my current qualifications and public health experience. So I'll start first by I'm talking about medical school. So I was a participant in the early medical school selection program through Boston University, which means that I had early acceptance into Boston University School of Medicine. I completed my matriculation at Boston University in May of 2008, and this is actually a copy of my medical doctorate, so there's no question about that. After which, during medical school, I signed up for the Health Profession Scholarship Program, which is a program through the military which sponsors individuals who are essentially high performing to get, so they sponsor them through medical school and then you give time back. So after completing my matriculation at Boston University School of Medicine, I enrolled as an officer in the United States military, where I went through training. Upon the completion of my training, I'm also provided, served in Afghanistan as a medical officer. And upon completing my time that was my required time with the military, I opted to really focus on population health. So the last year or so of my time with the military was really focused on policy development and population health related issues. And so one of the things that I took into consideration was, the impact that systemic and structural issues were having on communities across the United States, particularly communities of color, and how things just weren't getting better. Instead of things getting better, things seem to be getting worse. And so that's evident here in the city of St. Louis as you look at the history of the city's medical infrastructure as well as the public health infrastructure. And the outcomes that we're currently seeing are a result of systemic and structural issues that have really been pervasive over decades and even centuries. And so instead of continuing to practice medicine, my decision was to really focus on population health and public health. And so after completing my time with the military, I served as the Director of Communicable Disease for the state of Illinois. And that you can get that information from their HR department if you haven't done so already. And during my time with Illinois as the Chief of Communicable Disease or Director of Communicable Disease, I led the Ebola response as well as the response for the Zika virus pandemic that impacted the world. As the leader, that required me not only being knowledgeable about infectious diseases, but also required me being able to leverage my knowledge and connect with other agencies that were required to respond. For example, during my time at the Illinois Department of Public Health, my office was housed in the Office of Health Protection. But it was also required for us to work with other government offices such as the Office of Emergency Preparedness and Response, community organizations. We work really closely with the CDC and other federal partners to make sure that the state had the resources that it needs, as well as making sure that we were able to conduct proper surveillance, which includes something that's a hot topic now, contact tracing. So it's not something that's new to public health. This is something that's been done for decades, and it's not just a scientific practice, but there's art to this as well. So not just anyone can do a lot of this work. In addition to overseeing the Ebola response as well as the Zika virus response, I also oversaw large outbreaks such as for vaccine preventable diseases such as measles and mumps. There was a large outbreak in a college population in Champaign, Illinois, of mumps, and so that was a lot of press around that. There's actually articles that you may have found from the CDC, MMWR, that I helped author for that. In addition to that, there was a large measles outbreak in the city's Cook County, and the city of Chicago, where I also played an instrumental role in that as well. I oversaw over 50 individuals as staff, and so having administrative experience is also something on my belt. So knowing not only how to train individuals, but also to support them, particularly during these really difficult times when we have health issues, public health issues that are having a dire impact on communities across states and across the world. After completing my time with Illinois Department of Public Health, I served as the Director of Communicable Disease Control Services, Vector Veterinary Programs, and Emergency Preparedness and Response at the St. Louis County Department of Public Health. In that role, I helped revamp a lot of the critical public health programs, particularly the Emergency Preparedness and Response Program and the Communicable Disease Program and the Vector Program in the city of St. Louis. But again, we're not just focusing on the communicable disease because we're required to it was necessary for us to really work across disciplines. So we work really closely with environmental health. We work really closely with administration, external offices such as law enforcement, the Weather Channel, so weather-related organizations, to make sure that we have the right stakeholders at the table in the event that a situation like a pandemic or a natural disaster were to occur. And so that's I did that for roughly 3.5 years in the city at St. Louis County. While I was in St. Louis County, I participated in the Population Health Training in Place program, which is a program that is established by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta, Georgia, which is an elite agency as it relates to public health. A lot of people see the CDC as the organization as it relates to public health, not only for this nation, but for the world, because they provide a lot of public health support, not only within the continental US, but also in countries abroad. I know that was a question that was raised earlier about me actually completing the program, and so it's kind of interesting. So on April 1st of 2019, the director, who was Dr. Tony Neary, who I know pretty well, emailed me because he didn't have my contact information. And so the email, and I'll read the email for you. The email says, "Hi, Fred. Congratulations on your new position at St. Louis City Department of Health. I was going through old files and found a graduation certificate with your name on it. Can we send it your way? Tony Neary." And so the fact that my picture wasn't on the website is because they hadn't sent me my graduation certificate yet. And so I actually reached out to them to follow up on that, and actually they're going to send it to me as soon as they can. The issue is now that their office is the Office for the Population Health Training in Place program, which also oversees the Preventive Medicine Fellowship program and another program. They're closed due to COVID-19, and so that's why my picture isn't on the site. But I can share this document with you, this email with you, in case you need it. And as Dr. Will Ross mentioned earlier, the Population Health Training in Place program is one of the most rigorous public health programs known, and it is recognized by national agencies because individuals, upon completion of that program, they're allowed to sit for the board certification in preventive medicine. All they need to have is a letter from the director supporting that. And so I think that's what you were referring to earlier. We mentioned about having equivalence, and so they use this program is used as an equivalence of some of the other other, I guess, public health programs that are in place. So it is recognized by national agencies, and individuals that complete this program can sit for the board certification for preventive medicine. And so I've completed that. In addition to completing that, I've also served as the subject matter expert for national and federal agencies, including Health and Human Services, the Human Resources Services Administration, as well as the National Association for County and City Health Officials on a variety of topics, including infectious disease. Even in my role now as the Director of Health, I continue to sit on various work groups for the American Public Health Association, as well as the National Association for City and County Health Officials, infectious disease work groups. And we work on policies and policy statements for the public health community across the United States. In addition to that, we also use this as an opportunity to serve as a soundboard. For example, if we're experiencing some public health issues in the city of St. Louis, being able to work with other professionals across the United States to kind of see what they've done to handle certain situations has helped us bring not only additional resources, but also bring additional expertise to the city that otherwise wouldn't be here. Over my time, through the military, through working with the Illinois Department of Public Health, as well as the St. Louis County Department of Public Health, I've made really strong relationships, not only with local organizations or departments of public health at the local and state level, but I've also maintained my relationship with federal partners. And this puts the city in a very interesting position because I'm able to have access to resources that individuals typically don't have access to. For example, working with the CDC's Division of Global Migration and Quarantine, which is a division that oversees travel. And so we have issues getting information about travel, individuals coming back from countries with high burden of disease or countries that have evidence of community spread, which is the case early on. with COVID-19, I'm able to work with them directly and get that information. Oftentimes it's frowned upon because the state is usually served as a liaison for the CDC for local public health agencies. But me being able to work directly with the CDC to get some of the critical information that we need to protect our citizens is really crucial. And so I'm grateful to have those relationships and everything in place. And that's kind of where I am now. You know, with COVID-19, as I've mentioned from the very beginning, you know, our planning started early because this isn't my first rodeo. So knowing what happened with Ebola, knowing what happened with Zika virus, and knowing what has happened with other diseases that are transmitted by, that are spread by respiratory transmission, such as measles and some other vaccine preventable diseases, I knew this was going to hit St. Louis at some point in time. So our planning didn't start in March. It started in early January. We actually held our first meeting with public health stakeholders, as well as emergency response stakeholders, law enforcement, government officials in January to make sure we were properly positioned to handle this pandemic. Has it been ideal? No, there's been some challenges. And I think to your point earlier, you know, there have been some issues as it relates to getting materials, just materials and materials, period. So whether it's PPE, testing supplies, testing reagents, I mean, there's just been a lot of challenges because people across the world have been looking for these same resources. And with testing materials in particular, those can be very difficult to get because not only do you is it difficult to get the materials, but after you obtain the materials, you also have to make sure they work with the machinery that private laboratories and laboratories in your jurisdiction use. And so there's a lot of things that people don't oftentimes see in the background. In addition to those things, making sure that our long-term care facilities and agencies that are providing care in congregate settings have the information they need. One of the things that has come to light is that a lot of long-term care facilities weren't properly prepared. So they didn't have really sound infection control protocols in place to deal with the spread of respiratory issues. And although that shouldn't be the case because we deal with influenza every year, you know, COVID-19 highlights these things. And so a lot of factors can go into an agency's ability to implement protocols. One could be staff turnover. You know, the more staff turnover you have to do training again and again. And sometimes you have a change in administration. Sometimes administration may not know that this is a need. But one of the things that the health department has done is we work closely with partners across the region and across the state to make sure that we were able to provide resources the best we can to the city of St. Louis residents and visitors. And what does that look like? So that looks like me working, you know, 18, 20 hours some days just to make sure that our partners have the resources that they need. That means me going on site to a facility that has an active outbreak and doing infection control with their staff, doing a turnover at 11 o'clock at night. That looks like me going out into the community, doing canvassing on Saturdays when I'm also doing other work. And so going out into the community, making sure the community has information they need, and also providing resources. You know, we provided thousands of face masks, hundreds of gallons of hand sanitizer and other resources to agencies that just did not have those resources because of a variety of issues. Sometimes, in some cases, they waited. They may have waited to order the supplies, or in a lot of instances, particularly with long-term care facilities, some of their supplies that had been ordered were being sequestered by the federal government and redirected to hospitals. So that was a real challenge. So people, lay persons really don't see that, and so but we see that on the public health front. And so our role as a public health agency, my role as the director of health was to make sure that those agencies receive the resources that they need. But not only that, it's also important that we conduct surveillance during this time. And so you mentioned the maps earlier and testing. I'll agree with you. You know, testing was a challenge as well. And as I mentioned before, getting those supplies have been difficult. When we looked at the data early on, we saw where the hotspots were. But first, we wanted to, before we put anything out on our website, we wanted to make sure that the data was accurate. So we worked to finalize our data, make sure our I's were dotted, our T's were crossed before we posted the information on the city's website. Because we felt like it was important to be able to bring the community along this journey with us. And the best way to do that is by providing them with comprehensive and accurate information. Doing otherwise would be an injustice. And I think for a lot of jurisdictions across the nation may have struggled with that. You know, how much information do we give, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, but we worked internally to make sure that we were able to put together a comprehensive picture of what was happening in the city of St. Louis. As it relates to the first testing sites, which were actually stood up by hospital systems, those weren't in minority neighborhood, they weren't in the neighborhoods of the most vulnerable population. And that was kind of, and you can't fault them for that either, because when we first started getting reports of COVID-19, it wasn't the minority population, the most vulnerable population that was being impacted. It was the affluent community. So individuals who had the means to travel from country to country. Those were the individuals that were being exposed, and they were bringing it back. And so I can't fault the health hospital system for standing up their testing sites where they were. But when we were looking at how the situation was evolving in the city of St. Louis, we knew at some point this was going to hit our most vulnerable populations. And so what we did is we started early on working with private laboratories, working with the supply commission to see where we could get testing supplies. And we also had to make sure that, you know, we will be able to stand up a testing site that was appropriate for the community. And I know you wanted, when we had our conversation, you wanted it to be in 63115, but because this was the first site, we also wanted to make sure that the site was, the operations and logistics were sound. Because otherwise what you'll have happen is you have a half-done site stood up, and then you end up with another issue. And so we worked really closely with Affinity Healthcare. They stood up the first site at 1717 Biddle. And this gave us, this was important for a few reasons. One, the community is one of the most vulnerable communities, is a vulnerable community in the city of St. Louis. Two, it gave them an opportunity to really bring their staff on board, to train them on what the proper infection control protocols, what protocols need to be implemented to not only protect the individuals that they will be serving, but it's also important for them to make sure their staff are properly protected, and so they can make any necessary adjustments. And one of the concerns that I had early on was, you know, if you stand up a site that's not near a brick and mortar medical facility, what happens in the event that there's a medical emergency, whether someone is having a stroke, someone is having a heart attack, or some other medical condition or issue, and they need emergency care. If you're out at a storefront, you may not have the resources there, but attaching the testing site, or standing up the testing site in a space where you have access to medical expertise, and so that in the event that a medical emergency happens, you can have your physicians, your nurses, who has the capacity to provide life-saving care. They can do that before the fire department or EMS gets there. And as we all know, even Dr. Ross and other staff, a matter of minutes can mean the difference between life and death. And so it wasn't just a matter of just looking at a map and seeing what was happening, but it was also a matter of making sure that we were operating in the best interest of the city of St. Louis residents. And if we overlooked those critical factors, we will be doing an injustice. And so as the director of health, I was not comfortable just standing up a testing site in a mobile storefront, wherever it was. We wanted to make sure that it was proper. And I'm grateful that the federal qualified health centers, Affinity Healthcare, People's Health Centers, Care STL Health, and Family Care Health Centers have all saw this need, and they've all stood up testing sites. And did it happen as rapidly as we wanted to? Absolutely not. But there were a lot of factors, and I'm sure you're aware of those factors, but we did it as fast as we could. And we're still working because there's still a lot of work to do. You know, just standing up the testing site, that's not enough. What other resources do individuals need? As we're doing our case disease investigation, we were finding that there are a lot of people in the city of St. Louis who needed to be monitored who did not have medical insurance. So what do? As the health department, I didn't think that was okay to just say, okay, well, you can't monitor yourself. Good luck. No, but we have staff that go out, we put together care packages, which includes hygiene kits, a thermometer, other resources they need to properly monitor their symptoms so they can report them to us in a timely manner. We have staff that actually go out into the community and deliver these to people that need to be monitored. That's important. And then as individuals, as we learn about individuals' needs, whether it's mental health services, primary care services, we also work with them. So we started working with, we work with another partner that we work with regularly, the Integrated Health Network. So we worked with them to link individuals to medical care homes, because this isn't about just the COVID-19 situation. These are people's lives, and we want to make sure that we can have a lasting impact on these individuals' lives beyond COVID-19. Things that, doing things like that, which typically are overlooked or people may not know about, is really important. In addition to that, looking at some of the gaps that the health department has. So one gap that I identified was, we really don't have a strong relationship with the faith community. And the faith community in the city of St. Louis is a staple. They provide a lot of resources for individuals, and they're a trusted agency. And sometimes the government agency can't be the forefront of, of everything that's being done. And so we started working with we established a clergy advisory board, which will help the health department moving forward, help them get information to their parishioners, who are oftentimes, individuals that we report on. So those are, a lot of them are the individuals who have diabetes, they have heart disease, they have asthma and other chronic diseases that we talk about all the time. And so not just looking at the data, but doing something about the data has been my approach. And as long as I'm in this position, that's what it will be. I know there are some questions about, whether I completed the program and all these other things. But as long as I'm in this role, that's my heart is with the community. Growing up as a young man in Atlanta, Georgia, I didn't have much. We struggled often. And so I understand the plight that our community has. But I also understand that there's an obligation that I have as an appointed official, as a public health professional, and even as a medical professional. There's an obligation that I have to serve the community in a way that it's in their best interest. And so that's been my approach in prior positions. That will continue to be my approach. We will use the data to drive our decision making, but we'll also give the community a platform to share their information with us, because you can't tell the complete story in data. And so in order for us to really tell the complete story for the city of St. Louis, we need to give the community a platform to not just be heard, but to hear them. And so when we're establishing initiatives and programs, that is really in their best interest. And so that's what we've been doing. That's the new culture of the City of St. Louis Department of Health. All the senior managers have gravitated towards that, and they really accepted that. And we've seen a tremendous return on our investment over the last year that I've been in this space. And so, I'm grateful for the mayor, and everyone that has been supportive of me in this role. I do think that there's a lot of opportunities for the city, not just through the COVID-19, but COVID-19 and beyond. And we have to do that in a way that is sound and evidence informed, but we also have to recognize that we can't do all this alone. The Board of Aldermen, you all play a critical role in the city. As a legislative branch for the city of St. Louis, we really rely on you all to get sound policies implemented. And we've done that since I've been in this office, and we'll continue to do that. We also have to work really closely with our academic partnerships, because there are opportunities there that we just haven't been able to leverage yet, or expertise that we haven't been able to leverage because of the partnerships haven't been well developed. And so as we establish ourselves as an academic health department, our aim is to work closely with the academic institutions to make sure that we're able to not only do surveillance, but also do sound research so that we can understand some of the whys behind the outcomes that we're seeing. We've done that for a couple of programs, especially we're doing it with our HIV program. As you all may know, in December of last year, the city of St. Louis declared itself to be a fast track city, which means at the time we were, I believe, one of 27 cities in the United States that had made that declaration, meaning that we were really holding ourselves accountable to make sure that we have resources and services in place for one of our most vulnerable populations, which are individuals that are living with HIV. In addition to that, we've worked with maternal child health. As you all know, infant mortality and maternal mortality outcomes are much more dire for minority communities. And so we started working with the academic health departments of St. Louis University and Washington University to answer one of the questions that was raised, which was, why aren't minority mothers seeking mental health services? And so we've been working to answer that question. Why is there such a stigma around, mental health services for mothers in the city of St. Louis? Because that impacts health outcomes as well. And so there's a lot of work that still has to be done. again, I'm grateful for this opportunity. I'm grateful for Dr. Ross, his support, the board and their support, as well as the Board of Aldermen and the work that they continue to do. And this is, COVID-19 is just another situation. In a few years, there'll be something else happening. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to lead the city, lead the health department at this time. And we've been doing so in a way that has been evidence informed, as well as we've been doing it in a way that is fiscally sound. So that's all I have for the moment.
Dr. Echols. Dr. Echols, this is Alderwoman Tyus. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well, yes.
Okay. As I said before, I was not prepared for you to be before us. I have some documents that I would like to submit to the committee. I did want you to be able to speak to this committee. City Council used to be a judge. He knows I would never have let you go on like that, that you did. Because that's not, a lot of what you said is not what's before us, okay? But I want you to have a chance to say what you had to say, because I will want you to come back and speak to to my resolution. We have several lawyers on this panel, and I didn't swear you in on purpose, because we can swear people in, and it's the same effective if you're testifying before Congress or court or whatever. They suggested that I asked you to perhaps, if you wanted to seek legal counsel, not Julian Bush, but your own legal counsel, and that will be something that you can do or not do. I'm not going to ask you questions now, because when I come back, I'll let you say what you want to say. But when we come back, I will be asking you questions that's pertinent to the things I want to ask you. And I want to bring the rest of the things forward. And I want you to give me a chance, if you have documents that show that you fit the requirements of the city charter, then we don't need to have another conversation, because I don't like people to impugn people's integrity, and I don't like people to talk really fast and talk over the situation either. So I'm still going to be set right on what my original purpose was, and so that's how I'm going to do that. But I did want you to have a chance to speak, and if other people have things that they want to ask you, that's fine. But I will be calling you back before my committee to ask you questions and to present documents, because I have been working on this for a really long time and looking into things. And it's not personal for me. It is about what is in the best interest of 63115, 63113, 63103, and any other hot spots. So people want to think that I'm just talking about 63115, but I was just as appalled that 63103 was also a hot spot. And so I have no questions for you at this time, because I was not prepared for you. And it's almost 5 o'clock, and so people have to go. So Alderwoman Spencer, do you want to ask Dr. Echols any questions?
If I have to answer questions at a later date, then I'll just answer those questions at that time.
Is that all right with you, Alderwoman Spencer?
Yes, absolutely. I don't know. I'm having a very tough time continuing here, given my family obligations and other things. Okay. Dr. Ross, thank you for being here today. Thank you for everybody that's on here still hanging on. But I would defer to my committee members who are also staying on the line if there's any questions that they would like to ask now.
I absolutely have questions. I mean, I apologize, but I thought that was the whole point of having a hearing.
I don't know that we want to continue to have multiple hearings. Perhaps if we can address some questions now, I think it might be helpful to do that.
Well,
I'm going to have them before my committee anyway, so I want to I want that to be known. Well, the resolution is in the Rules Committee, so we are, and everybody's open to coming to that committee and doing that. But when I saw it was 5 o'clock, I knew it was going to be tight. And that wasn't that's why I only wanted 3 people to testify, because I have not only Dr. Echols, but some other people that I wanted to testify. So I didn't want it to be 4 or 5 or 6 hours. So anybody that has questions, that's fine, but I don't.
Yeah. With all due respect, I mean, this is our job, right? Like, our job is to ask questions and figure out what.
I have no problem.
Yes. No, there's no dispute there. So,
Okay, so Madam Chairs, would you prefer that I hold off or until a later date or ask questions?
I thought we were continuing this on tomorrow, Madam.
With all due respect, Alderwoman Howard, I'm asking the chairwomen of the committees about their opinion. I'm happy to
Excuse
ask
me.
questions now or hold
Excuse-
off.
Dr. Echols has expressed, but this is your Alderwoman. He had expressed that if he was going to have to come back, he would want to answer the questions later. I was not prepared for him today. You know this. I don't like to turn people down if they're there. If you show up, I'm going to let you speak. But if you're prepared now to ask him questions, because I asked the clerk to put the three people who I talked about, and that was Dr. Ross, Mr. Bush and Mr. Frank. That was who I was prepared for today, because I thought that it would run long. So, but if you're prepared and the chairwoman of health and mine, I'm fine. I'm just not going to have questions. Mine are going to be later.
I am fine with the members of the health committee asking questions now, and if you want, I would be happy to go through the list of seniority so we can move along with that.
I would appreciate that, Chairwoman. I have just a few questions.
Alderwoman Gracia, you're up.
Dr. Echols, thank you again for spending so much time with us. I'm curious just about a few things. I just want to say off the cuff, I was exceedingly excited when you got hired. But I think that the questions we all have now are valid. So I'm curious where you completed your medical residency and where?
So I did training at the Naval Portsmouth Hospital in Portsmouth, Virginia.
Okay, and then so you held a medical license in Virginia?
So I operated under the Navy, but
under the Navy, okay. So when did that license lapse?
When I got out of the Navy, so I was last in the Navy in 2012.
2012, okay. And so what? I'm curious.
So I not getting a license is a personal choice that I made because I didn't want to take the traditional route, and so. In my previous capacities, I haven't seen patients, and so there really wasn't a need for me to maintain my licensure. As it relates to I know one of the questions you may have is about the statement that was made during the hearing. That was there was a lot happening at that time, and so I also was I was really nervous, and so what I heard Michael Garvin say was, "Are you a physician?" And so that's why I said yes. But as soon as things were over, we felt that it was a misstatement, and we were corrected. That's why we were able to get those documents to them as soon as we could. And so my integrity is really important to me. And so as I move forward, even whether I'm in the city or somewhere else, I always want to be truthful and forthcoming with information, particularly as it relates to me and my role and any impact that may have on the city at large. And
okay,
so
and I appreciate that, because I was listening to that call and I knew that you were not a licensed physician in Missouri, but did not know that you are not a licensed physician currently licensed anywhere. So can you explain, if you're able, under what qualification under the charter you were hired to fulfill the role that you're in? And yeah.
So a couple of things. So typically it's option number 2, which was having an advanced degree. So the degree that's mentioned in the charter is specifically having an MPH. But most people may not be aware that even in medical school, there is a public health component to medical school. And although it's a doctorate of medicine, there are public health components, particularly around management and evaluation of data, looking at health outcomes and those sorts of things. And so that has been, I believe in the early 2000s when that focus kind of changed and more public health curricula was added to curriculums that medical schools were implementing. In addition to that, having the more formalized training with the Centers for Disease Control, which is recognized by accreditation boards, which is the program I completed with the population health training in place program, which was administered and continues to be administered by Dr. Tony Neary at the CDC in Atlanta, Georgia. And that program was really difficult, as it's time I was an administrator in St. Louis County, but I was able to manage, doing the coursework required for that, as well as my work as administrator in the public health department. So we had to complete projects, and we also had to do in-person visits with the CDC to make sure we were properly on board. But then there was some items, some curricular items that they really wanted us to have to learn from CDC professionals. And so when we would go to Atlanta, Georgia, for the training, they would have their subject matter experts come in and talk to us about a variety of topics. And that will set the foundation for some of the exercises that we were required to complete as part of that training program. And as I mentioned to Alderwoman Tyus, I did complete the program, and I have an email from the director of the program saying, they found my graduation certificate in the files, and so they can they'll be mailing that to me. I do know that other law firms had contacted the CDC inquiring about that, and so whoever was used to obtain that information, they have the same response. And as soon as the CDC received that inquiry, they actually called me and said, "Hey, what's going on?" Because this doesn't seem abnormal. And so I was able to give them some background information and provide them, and their response should have been the same, so that I've completed the program and they have my graduation certificate on file.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you let me know when you first thought that the coronavirus would be something that we would have, that would be so impactful in St. Louis City, that we would have to deal with it at the level that we currently are?
So actually in January, and I say in January because I know how respiratory illnesses how respiratory illnesses are transmitted, and oftentimes people may have been exposed, but they don't develop symptoms until a while after. And so that's the same situation that happens with SARS and MERS. And so you had widespread transmission before people even knew it. And so what happened with COVID-19 was that it was first detected in December of 2019.
I'm sorry, Doctor, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. So I just want to be respectful of people's time. So you thought it would be it would be an impact in St. Louis City in January. Aldermen were not briefed on this until I made a request to Jacob Long, the mayor's communications director, in February 28th, 2020. And at meetings on March 8th and March 10th, you indicated to aldermen that you thought this was basically something that was very similar to the flu.
Not similar to, not correct you. So not similar to the flu. It's transmitted similar to the flu. But this is a new virus. There's something that we're still learning about, and it hasn't been around for.
I just want to be very clear that it was my impression and the impression of a number of aldermen that, I guess a follow-up question to me would be, how beholden do you feel to the administration? Because again, I was very excited to have you come on board, but the mayor's administration definitely didn't think it was important to brief aldermen on this issue until I reached out on February 28th. And I definitely I didn't record conversations, but I had conversations with aldermen who felt gaslighted by the conversations we were having with the mayor and the chief of staff and you about the fact that this was not something that we really had to worry about. And we asked very specifically for plans of what would happen if we started seeing illness in the city and how we would shut things down and how that would happen. And there was no plan. There was absolutely no plan on March 8th or March 10th communicated to aldermen.
Okay, and I think I'm not sure what the communication was, but I know for the health department, we started planning in January. And so my first meeting in January was with law enforcement. We met with airport officials, particularly the emergency operations response officials, with EMS providers, to make sure that was a plan in place. And so what we found was that every organization had a plan in place, but the common knowledge of those plans wasn't necessarily in place. And so what we did was we used that first meeting as an opportunity to identify any gaps. And so one of the gaps was making sure that other agencies actually knew what the response plan would be. So if someone came into the airport and they had symptoms of respiratory illness, how they would be managed and how that information will be communicated to either the City of St. Louis Department of Health or our counterparts in the county. We also work with them to make sure that the appropriate individuals were on their distribution list. So that was the other gap. For example, myself and some of my emergency preparedness team, some other individuals weren't on their some of the other organizations' email distribution list. And so we use it as an opportunity to make sure that we started receiving those messages. And so we've been doing so since that time. But every health department has an emergency operations plan in place, and that covers a variety of issues. So I think, one of the challenges is, particularly during these situations, if, Board of Aldermen or other individuals aren't familiar with those plans, then it seems like, it's something new. And so it's unfortunate that that's the case, but I think, there would be a good opportunity for the health department to really inform the Board of Aldermen about the emergency operations plans that are in place and how detailed they are. And that we make sure that they're reviewed annually. We also make sure that they're exercised. So we receive public health emergency preparedness funds through the CDC, and part of our scope of work includes doing exercises, not only exercises for the city, but also regional exercises. So we partner with the St. Louis County, St. Charles County, to make sure that we're exercising our plans. And we also engage other agencies to make sure that they're aware of what our plans are. We have after-action reports after each exercise to make sure that we identify gaps.
Again, Dr. Echols, thank you. I appreciate it. I know that you are spending exorbitant amounts of time on this, and I do respect that and appreciate that. Just want to follow up with another question with respect to the CDC's recommendation on encampments for the unhoused. Can you articulate why you broke up the encampment by City Hall because of the alleged health risk, but allowed the other encampments that are in the city of St. Louis to stay?
All right, so the Centers for Disease Control guidelines, the guidance was, to not disturb encampments if you do not have proper housing for them. And so what we did, typically this is held, this responsibilities within the Department of Human Services. So we've been working really closely. So we worked diligently to make sure there was ample housing for individuals prior to breaking up the encampments. And so we did that, and then there was but that wasn't stopping there, right? So the Department of Human Services continues to go out and do outreach, and so they should be engaging some of those other encampments. So, for example, the one on the riverfront, as well as some of the others that are in the city of St. Louis. So.
Okay, thanks again. I just want to let you know that most of us are on your side. And want to be able to trust you and rely on your leadership, but many of the things that have been happening are troubling. And we just need honest answers and a path forward in terms of support. I apologize, I cannot remember the name of the woman who's in charge of contact tracing for the city. She testified at the health committee last week. She was incredibly impressive. You have obviously hired an amazing staff. I could not be more impressed with Dr. Ross and the Board of Health and Hospitals. And I really wish we could just all work together in a more meaningful way. And I don't know what's causing the rift, but thank you for your time and in explaining things. This was obviously not an easy conversation for you.
Thank you for the question. I really appreciate the question. There's a lot of thought within it. I mean, you know, again, I'm here to answer questions honestly and do
Yeah.
just.
And we're here for you. We all want to help. I feel like most of the aldermen that I speak with on a regular basis don't feel like we've been able to participate in a meaningful way during this process. In fact, I'm working with Dr. Jason Purnell on the regional response team and have a better relationship with Sam Page at this moment than I do with our own mayor, which is makes me very sad. But just know that I'm available and want to help. And I think we all have the same goals. So thanks again for letting me carry on. I'm done.
Thank you. Just to make one final statement, Alderwoman Engrossment. So thank you for that. But one of the challenges with COVID-19 is, you know, having additional help. We want additional help, but sometimes additional help can also cause other issues, particularly around, you know, one of the challenges that some agencies had around just with the contact tracers. You know, you hire additional people, but then if those individuals, let's say an individual comes in ill and then they spread COVID-19 to your staff, then you have to quarantine your staff. And so that has actually happened in some other spaces. And so I'm very mindful of how we use resources. And so.
Oh gosh, no, I get it. I'm just talking about the aldermen. Like there are elected officials who.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think, you know, the health department, we can do a better job of engaging the board of aldermen, because as I tell people, you know, health impacts everyone and everything. And so we really need to, I think we do have good working relationships with some aldermen. You know, some have championed, particularly on the Health and Human Services Committee, have championed board bills for us, and we're really appreciative of that. As we operate with the health and racial equity lens, there's some changes that need to be made, and we can't do that without you all. And I think, you know, we've been working with you all in a meaningful way. And I think, you know, all of our, there's room for improvement for all of our relationships, right? And so I think using the COVID-19 situation as a foundation, a building block, so that we move, when we get beyond this, we're in a much better place. And so figuring out how the health department and other agencies particularly can work more closely with the Board of Aldermen is something that we should consider. So thank you.
Chairwoman Tyus, you're on mute. Chairwoman Tyus, you're on mute. Chairwoman Tyus, you're on mute.
Alderwoman Spencer, were there other members that on Health and Human Services Committee that had questions?
Well, Alderwoman Tyus was the next in line. You know, and we could go down the list. Alderwoman Tyus, did you have? We could come back to you since you're the chair of this hearing here. Alderwoman Green.
Thank you. Not
and
particular.
Let me just interject really quickly here as the co-chair here. And I don't want to cut any meaningful conversation off, but given that it is after 5 o'clock and we do have a call with Dr. Echols at 6, many of us do, just being mindful, we are going to go through a lot of other, we have an opportunity to talk about other questions, and we can call hearings related to specific issues, some of which were already addressed. So let's try to keep the hearing for the remainder of it germane as possible to the issue so that we can get through it, and that we can have time to fit a small dinner in before our evening applications. Thank you. Alderwoman Green.
Thank you. I don't really have, questions at the moment. I think the Alderwoman from the 6th Ward asked a lot of the questions that were kind of on folks' mind. But I do just want to reiterate, I think, some of what she said as well. I don't think anybody you know, while there's been, you know, some frustration, I think, with some of us in the administration and the handling of certain points of what is happened during COVID-19, I don't think any of us here are really questioning your leadership capabilities or your past experiences and qualifications. You know, the only thing that you know, we've been concerned about, or you know, since being brought to our attention, is whether, you know, the qualifications meet that which is required in the charter, and if they don't, what does that mean? And I don't think that is a question that is going to be answered today. And I greatly appreciate you coming before the committee, answering some very challenging questions, hearing some very challenging, you know, statements that have been made over the last couple of hours. And I won't belabor anything. I you know, won't drag this any longer, but I just wanted to thank you for coming before us today and you know, being open and honest in your communication with us as we kind of work through you know, what's before us at the moment. So thank you, and that's it.
Thank you.
Okay, Alderwoman Martin had to attend to her family. Alderwoman Navarro.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I don't have any questions. I just want to be brief and say that I think, like all of us, we know that right now the most important thing for our city and for the Board of Aldermen to be focused on is this epidemic. And I think how we spend our time is incredibly important to this community. I know that everyone's time is very valuable, especially the time of Dr. Echols and Dr. Ross. I thank you for being here today, and I just urge that if there are going to be any future hearings where we invite them to speak, that it's very clear to everyone what the purpose is, who's going to be speaking, what the questions will be, so that we can make the most use of people's time, because time is very valuable right now, and it makes a difference to people's health and to people's lives. And so I just want to urge us to be respectful of that. And I thank both of you for being here. From everything that I've heard today, I feel like the city of St. Louis is very lucky to have someone like Dr. Echols with his experience and his qualifications to be serving us at this particular time. I understand that scrutinizing the process for appointments is important and it's part of our job. I think there's also a time and a place for these sorts of things. And I think right now, as I said before, the number one thing right now is figuring out how we best serve the people in our city. And I am grateful that Dr. Echols is part of that team. So thank you.
I have to apologize to Alderwoman Howard. I thought you had taken a leave. We were looking.
I had to shut off. My dog was barking for his dinner. I apologize. No, I think, you know, we do need to look and scrutinize things. However, you know, we're in a crisis, a health crisis right now, and we're continuing to be in a health crisis for our most vulnerable populations, as the good doctor mentioned. And I appreciate his time and consideration and all his devotion to the crisis as we've seen it. His leadership has been impeccable. And I think we, as St. Louisans, we've suffered a hit, but I think it could have been worse. And hopefully we will not wind up back there and have a rebound at this time. But I think we still need to continue to monitor. And Dr. Echols, I look forward to seeing you again before the committee and being able to go into things in a little more depth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Am I now unmuted? Or are you able to hear me?
I can hear
Hello?
you. Yes.
Okay. So we're not going to adjourn this committee because the way they set up, the clerk set up the committee, the Rules Committee has to go back into session tomorrow. So don't adjourn. Anybody else who wants to speak, they will. I will be having Dr. Echols back because we have not addressed the information, the things that I wanted to address. And I wanted to know if there was anybody left on rules that had any. Alderman Todd, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I just have a statement. I want to thank Dr. Echols for coming in. I think my priority is life, which means this health and safety. And so as far as the information I have so far, Dr. Echols has navigated us through the health, safety, and life, and he has experience in that area due to his hands-on work in this city at this particular time. So I want to thank him for coming to our committee and the job that he's doing at this time.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Yes.
Is there anybody, did you have anything else? Because otherwise, I'm going to recess this committee and then we're going to resume at 1 or 2 o'clock tomorrow. Excuse me, Alderman Boyd. We're going to, because it's way past what we had intended to be, we're going to recess the committee, right? And we have to come back because we have to still do another board bill and rules.
Okay, just for full circle, so that the entire Health and Human Services Committee will get an opportunity to ask questions.
Right.
I'd like to give Alderwoman Wright the opportunity, and then the Health and Human Services Committee will have fully exhausted its list at that point, and we can
All right.
move forward.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Wright.
Thank you so much. And I also want to, everyone has stated so well, I think a lot of my concerns and compliments as well. Dr. Echols, thank you for taking this time today to be with us. I know that there is a whole lot of other work that needs to be done, as evidenced by the desk behind you, and the pandemic that we're dealing with here. I think that there a lot of issues that we are dealing with are due to the silos of our city government. Communication that happened between the departments, between the administration, between the Board of Aldermen, amongst ourselves, all across the board, and regionally as well. And I think the best that we can do to serve the people of the city of St. Louis as we go forward is A, to protect their health, right? And that is our foremost goal, and B, to come out of this with with sunshine on what it is that we're doing, how we're operating, and coordination and collaboration that actually works to save people's lives in the long term, right? In all of the health issues that affect us day in and day out throughout the city of St. Louis, and particularly with an eye to racial equity as we go about it. And I know that is of particular concern to you, and that is something that we've seen at the beginning of your tenure and as we go forward through this process as well. So just echoing all of the comments of my colleagues as well, I hope that as we go forward through this investigation, that we find a way to keep you and keep the work that you are doing. I think it is important that we satisfy the requirements of the charter, but the more that we can do to make sure that we're on the books, above the books, and also continuing this good work, I think, is really important. And I don't know that those things are mutually exclusive at this point, and I would hope that they are not. Thank you all for taking the time to be here. I know that everyone sacrificed a lot today. So,
thank you.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Chair Tyus. I want to reiterate gratitude for everyone spending time here without taking too much more. As I mentioned when we opened this hearing, prioritizing is important. We have limited time as we move through this, and then we can do any number of things as a matter of business and representing our constituency. So we have to make sure that we are efficient with our time. This has been 3.5 hours, and I'm glad we were able to get through a long, at least a significant series of questions. Dr. Echols, Dr. Ross, I don't know if Richard Frank has left. Thank you all. Excuse me, Judge Bush. Everybody who spent an enormous amount of time going through these questions. That's all I have is gratitude for the time.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. If the members of the Health Committee want to leave, my engrossment, we have to discuss what time we're gonna start back up tomorrow. So if you guys want to leave, it'll just be a few seconds. We're just going to do details about. We still have one board bill that we have to engross.
Good night, you all. I'm leaving.
Thank you.
Okay, make comment.
We're going to have more hearings. It is now 5:23. I have someplace to go. So thank you. I appreciate it. Alderwoman Green, Alderwoman Howard. City Councilor, thank you so much. You can leave. And Dr. Ross, both of you guys will be hearing from me. You guys can leave. Thank you. I didn't mean for it to be this long, so I'm so sorry. I enjoyed speaking with both of you all. And thank you, Dr. Ross, for appearing. And Richard Franks, if you're still here, Personnel Director, thank you all. I appreciate it. Hi, Alderman Bruin. Okay. Since we still have to look at the information that we received regarding Alderman Boyd's board bill, and I wanted to have a chance to speak with Mr. Hollins, and I wanted to, the treasurer to look at what Mr. Hollins said versus what her person said. Is tomorrow at 1 or 1:30 good for you all for us to continue if we take a recess till tomorrow?
Anytime is good. Anytime is good for me, so anybody, I will go along with whatever y'all come up with.
Okay.
Okay, I can meet tomorrow but I can't be here for an extended time tomorrow. I have my grandson tomorrow, so I can be to get the, if we want to get that bill out, but I can't do another marathon because I've been on this since 10 o'clock this morning. So, I mean, I'm just telling you, we can take care, if we can, are we going to?
Oh, you have Ways and Means. I'm sorry, you have Ways and Means.
On this thing, right. I'm getting a little sharp here. I was wondering, now, are we just going to hear those bills? Or are we going to interview the good doctor again?
No, that was not. So it got different, and he was here, and I still believe that when people are here, you give them a chance. That was not the intent.
Yeah, that's
okay. Fine. So it just got hijacked a little bit, but I don't know how you don't let people do that if they're
no,
the
subject. I understand. But what I'm saying is the plan to
tomorrow we're only going to deal with the one bill. We did the other bills. We did those already. So we just have that one.
We have board bill number 1. Shush.
No, we just have whatever the alderman from the 22nd. Was it 9 or whatever his board bill? We just have one bill.
That's all.
We did that. That's
right. We're going to do that tomorrow, and then that's it, or.
Right, and so I'm just trying to see what is a good time for you guys. Is it 1:30, 1 o'clock?
1:30 is fine.
I can't. I have something from 12:15 to 1:30, and then another at 2 o'clock. So
and is Ways and Means meeting tomorrow morning at 10?
Yes, ma'am, at 10. Hold on.
And then it's the Education and Youth Matters at 1.
Oh, so what about, is 3 too late?
So 3 I could do.
Is 3? Okay.
Hold on.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, ma'am. I'm checking now, but I think that'll work.
$3 o'clock? Okay.
Is that a yes, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Education and Youth Matters is at 1 o'clock, so that should be fine.
Okay, 3 o'clock okay with everyone?
Yes.
I'll do my best.
Okay, all right, so we're gonna recess until 3 o'clock, and it'll just be the Rules Committee. It will not be Rules and Health.